My mother-in-law, Catherine, said some harsh things when we found out my husband would be moving abroad. She took away our house, leaving me and my daughter with nowhere to go. Feeling lost, I went to the park with my 2-year-old. Out of nowhere, police surrounded us and asked us to go to the station in the pouring rain. Shivering from the cold, I followed them. At the police station, I was surprised to find Emma, a 35-year-old woman, waiting for me. She shared her story of meeting her husband, Bob, at work, getting married, and having a daughter named Lily. Emma, Bob, Lily, and Catherine, my mother-in-law, lived together in a new apartment. They initially rented, but after Catherine's husband passed away and she had knee problems, they bought an apartment for better accessibility. They considered a house but opted for an apartment with an elevator. They made a down payment and took out a 35-year loan. Bob's company doesn't usually transfer employees often, but since we bought our house, they assured us he wouldn't be moved anytime soon. However, he ends up traveling for work almost every week to different states. With a 2-year-old daughter, I get stressed when he's away. Initially, Catherine, my mother-in-law, was helpful, but now she doesn't assist with childcare and even adds to my workload. She leaves dishes around without cleaning them, and even when I ask her to rinse them, she just apologizes without taking action. Interestingly, she rinses the dishes when Bob is around, and I only noticed recently. I used to think it was okay since she occasionally helped, but now I believe she's intentionally making things difficult for me. She also plays games, like asking if I need anything from the store and later saying she actually did. This happens frequently. Despite her knee problems, I wanted to help her, but my willingness to assist is fading. I considered talking to Bob, but I didn't want to stress him more. Catherine's behavior started when we began living together and has continued for years. A friend suggested it might be a form of bullying and advised talking to Bob. However, I feared that involving him could lead to Catherine being placed in a facility since she has no other relatives. I considered enduring it until an event changed my perspective. That day, I had intended to drop off Lily at my parents' place. They adore having Lily over for sleepovers. During our chat, they suggested I stay over sometimes too. Although I'd love to, my concern for leaving Catherine alone held me back. After a brief visit, I decided to head back to the apartment where Catherine was waiting. Upon reaching there, I realized I had left the keys at home. Despite my initial worry, I remembered Catherine was at home, so I rang the intercom. However, there was no response to the room number I dialed. Wondering if she had gone out, I decided to wait outside. 2 hours passed with no sign of Catherine. It was 7 p.m., and darkness had set in. Just then, another resident arrived, and I entered with them. Knowing Catherine rarely went out at night, I was confident she was at home. With that belief, I pressed the intercom button outside our apartment. Though I heard the ding-dong sound, there was still no response. Waiting by the door, I eventually heard a faint sound from inside, confirming Catherine's presence. Despite trying the intercom several times, she refused to come out. Feeling defeated, I spent the night at a nearby motel, planning to return when Bob came back from his business trip. What happened? Out shopping, actually. I explained to Bob that Catherine had locked me out. He was rightfully upset on my behalf, but Catherine casually attributed it to her hearing loss, saying, "Maybe I didn't hear because of my hearing. I'm getting old, you know," with a hidden smirk. Glad to be back inside, I grabbed my keys and went to pick up Lily from my parents' house. When I discussed the situation with them, they'd offered support, saying, "Sounds like she's giving you a hard time. If it becomes too much, you're always welcome back here. Remember, you're our precious daughter." Their comforting words brought tears, but I quickly wiped them away in front of Lily and headed home. Things were quiet with Catherine for a while, but suddenly, Bob's permanent international transfer was confirmed. Despite just buying a place, he asked, "What do you think about staying in the U.S.? Can you handle living with my mom?" Unable to answer immediately, considering potential stress for Lily, I eventually decided it would be best for us to stay in the U.S. Shortly after this decision, Bob had to leave for Europe. Though he was concerned, work kept him occupied, so the life of me, Lily, and Catherine was about to begin. Living with Catherine took a turn for the worse once Bob left for Europe. Her attitude changed drastically. On a stormy day, Catherine surprised me with a bombshell. "Now that Bob's gone, wouldn't it be better if you and Lily move out?" Shocked, I asked for clarification, but she insisted. "I'll take over. I can't relax with strangers in the house. Please leave right now." I couldn't believe her audacity. While it's true we aren't blood relatives, I've always tried to make our living together comfortable, treating her like family. Yet to Catherine, it seemed we were merely an afterthought. Considering going back to my parents' place, Catherine urged me to leave immediately. Before I knew it, Lily and I were thrown out, dressed as we were. Despite my pleas, Catherine refused to open the door. Lost and confused, I carried Lily through the pouring rain to a nearby park, hoping its roof would offer some shelter. Ideally, I would have checked into a motel or returned to my parents' place, but I left my wallet and phone inside the house. Feeling helpless, I sat in the park, trying to figure out our next move. Time passed in the torrential downpour, and overwhelmed by fatigue and cold, I began to doze off. It was dark, and despite the summer, the cold was biting. As bad as things were, the only option seemed to be a 3-hour walk to my parents' home. While pondering our situation, I noticed 2 distant lights approaching through the rain. Despite the obscured visibility, I could tell they were police officers. Hoping for help, one of them called out, "Are you Enma? And is this little one Lily?" Surprised they knew our names, I weakly confirmed, "Yes, that's us." The officer then requested, "Please come to the station with us." Perplexed, I questioned, "Why the police station?" Unsure if something was wrong, I complied as they urged Lily and me into the patrol car. We were freezing, but the officers had brought large towels and assured us, "You might need these. We've got spare clothes at the station for you." Curious about how they knew about us and the reason for heading to the police station, I asked, "How did you know where to find us?" Their response was, "We'll explain everything once we're back at the station. For now, just try to relax." Exhausted, I soon dozed off and woke up to find we had arrived at the police station. Inside, to my surprise, I saw Catherine and my uncle. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" He explained that Bob had contacted him. "Bob suspected you might be having issues with his mom, and since he's abroad, he wanted me to keep an eye on things for him." My uncle shared that Bob had talked to him about this issue previously, asking him to keep an eye on things since he couldn't be there himself due to being overseas. He had seen us in the rain earlier and considered taking us in, but Catherine's extreme behavior prompted him to report it to the police. That's how the officers knew our location and came to our aid. Catherine, sitting on a sofa at the police station, glared at me, seemingly unaware of the reason for her presence. She argued, "Why do I have to be here? I have a bad knee. If Bob were here, this wouldn't be happening." Despite her protests, the situation arose from Bob seeking my uncle's help. In discussions with the police, the possibility of legal implications emerged, leading to the suggestion that I consider hiring an attorney. Catherine dismissed it, saying, "An attorney? That's an overreaction. I just locked the door, that's all. I didn't do anything else." My uncle defended us, highlighting the severity of Catherine throwing us out in torrential rain. He asserted that, in fact, I was the rightful owner of the house. Catherine believed Bob was the owner, but she was mistaken. My uncle, running a real estate business, had arranged a great deal on a condo for us, recommended by Bob. The property was put under my name, a decision I had been indifferent about initially but now appreciated. Following my uncle's counsel, I opted to hire a lawyer. The legal expert conveyed that evicting Catherine would pose challenges, suggesting that placing her in a care facility might be the most feasible solution. Upon learning this, I promptly called Bob to provide an update. Bob, caught off guard by the escalation of the issue, expressed his desire to return from Japan for a thorough discussion. He mentioned considering the option of placing Catherine in a facility. Unaware of these developments, Catherine, still at the police station, casually snacked on crackers. Unable to return home with her, I decided to seek refuge at my parents' place until Bob's return. With Bob expected back in a week, I had some time to contemplate our next steps. If Bob didn't stand by me, divorce seemed like the only recourse. Regret lingered, wishing I had sought advice sooner. A week later, Bob returned from Europe, and I moved back home from my parents' place. Due to the urgency of his return, Bob had limited time in Japan before going back to Europe, so we needed to discuss our next steps. I heard some things from Emma's uncle. Is all of that true? Catherine stubbornly denied any wrongdoing, claiming it was all lies and that I was plotting to evict her. Surprisingly, Bob, who should have supported me, seemed inclined to consider Catherine's perspective. Do you have any evidence to prove Emma's plotting something? He asked Catherine. Evidence? Of course not, she replied. Bob then turned to me, asking if I had any evidence. Being busy with work, I hadn't been able to keep a close eye on things, but I handed Bob a voice recorder I had with me. What's this? When Bob played it, he heard recordings of Catherine not only evicting me, but also frequently berating me, calling me a worthless wife. In response, Catherine quickly defended herself, claiming it was taken out of context. Despite Catherine's attempt to downplay her actions, a barrage of recorded verbal abuses played from the voice recorder, revealing numerous instances, some of which weren't even captured. Bob's hand, holding the voice recorder, trembled with tension and anger. Catherine, looking guilt-ridden, claimed, "Everyone has their moments, right? I was just frustrated at that time, but it was just this once." However, the evidence spoke volumes. When Bob questioned her, she remained silent, and as he asserted the need to protect me and Lily, Catherine, probably witnessing this side of Bob for the first time, appeared frightened and speechless. Discussions continued until Bob's return to Europe. I made it clear that I couldn't continue living with Catherine, especially with Lily in the picture, and Bob seemed to share my sentiment, leaning towards placing Catherine in a care facility. However, Catherine strongly opposed the idea, complicating the discussions. Despite her resistance, I decided to sell the house. You can't stay here anymore. If you don't want the facility, you'll need to find another place. Catherine resisted, refusing to allow the sale of the house, but it was a tough decision to accommodate. Lily and I had resolved to move to Europe, a choice influenced by Bob's regret for not being more present for his family. Though hesitant about living abroad, knowing Bob would be with us provided reassurance. Additionally, Lily, being only 2 years old, would benefit from practicing her communication skills in Europe. Therefore, selling the condo, which still had a mortgage, became the only viable option. Leaving it as it was meant Catherine would have to cover the mortgage, an unrealistic expectation given her fixed income. Considering her future needs, someone should be available to assist her. Despite our efforts, Catherine staunchly refused to move into a facility. Consequently, we had to take the step of placing her there against her will. "I'm sorry, but I've got to head back to Europe. Could you handle any required procedures here?" Bob inquired before his departure. With assistance from those around me, I successfully completed the necessary steps for Catherine's admission into the facility. The facility staff kept me informed about her condition, and unfortunately, she wasn't faring well. It would have been different if she were just feeling down, but it appeared she was causing trouble for others in the facility. Before leaving for Europe, I visited her to check on her well-being. However, she lashed out, exclaiming, "What's the big idea? Why have you locked me up in this place?" Her frustrations extended to the staff, complaining about the food, discomfort of the beds, and snide remarks from other residents. When I apologized to the staff, they were understanding. "It's all good," one of them reassured me. "We encounter this behavior often. Leave it to us. We'll keep you updated, and if anything arises, we'll give you a call, so don't worry." Despite enduring harassment from Catherine during our time living together, I couldn't shake off my worries as I headed to Europe. Upon reaching Paris, Bob greeted me at the airport, and we made our way to the apartment we had rented. While it's true that rents in Paris are often higher than in Texas, Bob's housing allowance from the company proved fortunate, allowing us to find a spacious and affordable place. Our neighbors in the building have been incredibly friendly and kind, even though my French isn't fluent. Just yesterday, a neighbor shared wine and cheese, and I reciprocated with some mac and cheese. Meanwhile, I'm gradually learning French alongside my daughter Lily, recognizing the limitations of self-study. I've also enrolled in a language school, where I've made friends with fellow Americans new to France. Life in Paris is truly enjoyable. Back in the States, my constant concern for Catherine often hindered my enjoyment during outings with friends. However, here in Paris, I can savor leisurely lunches without such worries. The only current concern is Lily, who is still too young for kindergarten. Typically, children here start kindergarten at 5, so I hope Lily picks up enough French by then. Thankfully, she seems to be catching on quickly. Once Lily starts preschool, I'm contemplating getting a job. Although Bob is okay with me staying at home, the experience of living in Paris has sparked a desire to explore more opportunities. Making friends with a waitress at a nearby cafe, I learned there might be a job opportunity there. The cafe is not only popular among the American community, but many customers are also learning English. While challenges may arise, our communication has improved since coming to France. I feel more confident expressing my feelings, and no matter what lies ahead, I believe we'll face it as a family. Right now, I'm experiencing a level of happiness I've never felt before.
The steam from the kitchen couldn't mask the emptiness of my dining room. 6 months after inheriting my mother's restaurant, Golden Lotus, I was failing. Only 3 tables were occupied during what should have been the dinner rush, and I knew exactly who to blame: myself. Table 4 says their dumplings are too dry, Jenny, my last remaining waitress, whispered as she hurried past. And table 7 is complaining about the sauce being too bland. I nodded, trying to keep my composure. Mom's dumplings had never been too dry. Her sauces were legendary in San Francisco's Chinatown. But I wasn't on. Another stellar evening, I see. The voice made my shoulders tense. I turned to find my sister-in-law, Amanda, standing in the entrance, designer purse dangling from her manicured fingers. Behind her, my older brother David wore the same disapproving expression he'd had since Mom's funeral. "We're just opening for dinner service," I said, straightening my apron. "What brings you here?" "Oh, Lucy." Amanda's sympathy was as fake as her eyelashes. "We thought we should check on you. After all, family needs to look out for each other." The way she said family made my skin crawl. Ever since she'd married David 5 years ago, Amanda had appointed herself the keeper of the Chen family's image. My modest restaurant didn't fit her vision of success. "I'm fine," I replied. "Just busy." David snorted, looking around the nearly empty dining room. "Yes, I can see how overwhelmed you are with customers." They followed me as I moved through the restaurant, Amanda's heels clicking on the worn wooden floors Mom had loved so much. Every step felt like an invasion. "The paint is peeling," Amanda noted, running a finger along the wall. "And these decorations, they're so dated. When was the last time you updated anything?" "Mom liked it this way." "Mom's gone, Lucy." David's voice was sharp. "And she clearly made a mistake leaving you the restaurant." The words hit harder than he probably intended, or maybe he meant them to hurt. David had never understood why Mom left Golden Lotus to me instead of him. He was the successful one, Stanford Business School, executive position, house in Pacific Heights. I was just the daughter who dropped out of college to help Mom run her little restaurant. "Actually," Amanda said, her tone dripping with false concern, "that's why we're here. We want to help." She pulled a document from her designer bag, laying it on one of the empty tables. "We've had several interested buyers look at the property. The location alone is worth a fortune. This offer here," she pointed to a number that made my eyes widen, "would set you up nicely. You could go back to school, start fresh." I stared at the paper, feeling slightly sick. "You've been showing my restaurant to buyers?" "Be reasonable, Lucy." David stepped closer. "You're drowning here. The food isn't the same. The customers are leaving, and let's be honest, you never had Mom's talent. She would hate seeing her life's work decline like this." Get out. My voice was quiet but firm. Lucy. Get out? Amanda gathered her papers with an exaggerated sigh. We're trying to help you. Think about it. The offer expires next week. After they left, I retreated to the kitchen, my sanctuary. The familiar scents of ginger and garlic should have been comforting. But tonight they just reminded me of everything I was losing. Mom had opened Golden Lotus 30 years ago, armed with nothing but her recipes and determination. She'd built it into one of Chinatown's most beloved restaurants. Celebrities had dined here. Food critics raved about her secret sauces. Even through the worst of times, Dad leaving, the recession, the pandemic, she kept the doors open. Now, 6 months after her death, I was watching it all slip away. Lucy? Jenny poked her head in. Table 4 wants to speak to the owner. Probably another complaint. I wiped my hands, straightened my shoulders, and headed out. The elderly couple at table 4 looked vaguely familiar. Regular customers, maybe from Mom's time. Are you Margaret Chen's daughter? The woman asked as I approached. I nodded, bracing for criticism. We've been coming here for 20 years, she said. Your mother's dumplings got us through some hard times. She hesitated. Dear, the food tonight. It's not the same. I know, my voice cracked slightly. I'm trying, but... Have you checked her recipe box? The man interrupted. The special one in the kitchen safe. I blinked. What safe? They exchanged glances. Margaret never told you about the safe behind the lucky cat. My heart started racing. The lucky cat, a gaudy golden statue that had sat on Mom's kitchen shelf for as long as I could remember. She'd always said it was watching over her secrets. I thought she was joking. Back in the kitchen, I approached the shelf where the cat had sat for decades. Sure enough, behind where it rested was a slight discoloration in the paint. Heart pounding, I carefully moved the heavy statue. There it was, a small wall safe, painted to match the kitchen walls perfectly. But what was the combination? I tried Mom's birthday. Wrong. The restaurant's opening date. Wrong again. My birthday, David's birthday, even Dad's birthday. Nothing worked. Frustrated, I slumped against the wall. The kitchen felt different now, charged with possibility and mystery. What had Mom hidden away? Why hadn't she told me about it? Then I remembered something. A conversation from years ago, when I was helping prep for the dinner service. Every great chef has a secret, Mom had said, chopping ginger with practiced precision. Something that makes their food special. Know what mine is? Your recipes? I guessed. She'd smile mysteriously. No, little Lotus. The secret is love. And do you know when I first fell in love with cooking? When? December 12, 1982. The day my mother taught me to make dumplings. With trembling fingers, I turned to the safe. 12 to 1282. The lock clicked open. Inside was a small red box, the kind used for jewelry, and an envelope with my name on it. The envelope contained a letter in Mom's elegant handwriting. My dearest Lucy, if you're reading this, then you've discovered my final secret. I always knew you would when the time was right. The restaurant is struggling, isn't it? You're trying to recreate my recipes, but something's missing. The customers can taste it. Your brother is probably pushing you to sell. Don't. What's in this box is more valuable than any real estate offer. It's my legacy, not just recipes, but the heart of Golden Lotus. The secret that made people line up around the block, that won awards, that built our family's dream. But before you open it, remember this. A recipe is just instructions on paper. The magic comes from the cook's heart. You have always had my heart, Lucy. That's why I left you the restaurant. Not because you were the better chef, but because you understand that food is about more than technique. It's about love, memory, and the courage to keep trying until you get it right. Now open the box, my little Lotus, and show them what you can do. All my love, Mom. With shaking hands, I opened the red box. Inside was a small key and another note. For the box in my old office closet. Everything you need is there. Make me proud. I clutched the key to my chest, tears streaming down my face. In the dining room, I could hear more customers leaving. Tomorrow, David and Amanda would probably return with more offers, more pressure to sell. But they didn't know what I had just found. Mom's final gift wasn't just recipes. It was a chance to prove myself, to save her legacy, to show everyone that she'd been right to trust me with Golden Lotus. I looked at my reflection in the stainless steel of the kitchen counter. For the first time in months, I saw not just grief and uncertainty, but determination. "Jenny," I called out. "After closing, I need your help with something. Tomorrow would change everything." The question was I ready for what Mom had left me to discover? Part 2, The Heart of Golden Lotus. Mom's office hadn't been touched since the day she died. Walking in after closing time, with only Jenny beside me, felt like stepping into a time capsule. The air still held traces of Mom's jasmine perfume, mixed with the scents of spices that had permeated the walls over decades. "Are you sure you want me here?" Jenny asked softly. "This seems private." I squeezed her hand. "You've stuck with me through everything. Your family now." The closet was small, tucked behind Mom's desk. Inside, beneath a stack of old menus and aprons, sat a wooden box with a small keyhole. The key from the safe fit perfectly. "Oh my God," Jenny breathed as I opened the lid. Inside was a collection of worn notebooks, their pages yellow with age and spotted with soft stains. Each one was filled with Mom's handwriting, not just recipes, but stories, secrets, techniques passed down through generations. But there was something else. Photographs, newspaper clippings, and letters documenting Golden Lotus's history. And at the bottom, a leather-bound journal with the true secret written on its cover. With trembling hands, I opened it. "My dearest Lucy, if you're reading this, you found not just recipes, but the heart of Golden Lotus. Every great restaurant has a soul, something that makes it more than just food and walls. Our soul is in these pages, in the stories of every person who helped make this place special. Remember Mrs. John, who taught me the secret to perfect dumpling folds? Her grandson now runs the vegetable stand down the street. He still saves the best bok choy for us. Remember old Mr. Wu, who loaned me money to fix the roof when the bank refused? His special spice blend is on page 47. I promise to keep it in the family. Every recipe here comes with a story, a connection, a piece of love woven into the ingredients. That's what your brother never understood. He sees numbers and property values. You see people and memories. Now it's your turn to add to these pages, to make these recipes your own, to build on our legacy. With all my love, Mom." P.S. Check page 93. That's where the real magic begins. I turned to page 93 and gasped. There, in detailed notes, was the secret to Mom's famous XO sauce, the condiment that had put Golden Lotus on the culinary map. But it wasn't just a recipe. It was a story of how she developed it, testing ingredients for months, combining traditional techniques with bold innovations. "Jenny," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "we're going to need ingredients. Lots of them." We worked through the night, Jenny helping me prep while I studied Mom's notes. Each recipe was a revelation, not just ingredients and methods, but the why behind every choice. The exact heat needed to bring out the scallop sweetness in the XO sauce. The precise folding technique that kept dumplings from drying out. By dawn, the kitchen smelled like my childhood memories. The first batch of dumplings looked exactly like Mom's. The sauce was perfect. "Try this," I said, offering Jenny a spoon. Her eyes widened. "Lucy, it's just like your mom used to make." I smiled through tears. "No, it's better." The next few days were a blur of cooking, testing, and rediscovering. I closed the restaurant for renovations, but really I was relearning everything. Each recipe in Mom's notebooks taught me something new, not just about cooking, but about Golden Lotus itself. The regular customers had their own pages. Mr. Chen from the bank loved his dumplings with extra chili oil. The Liu family always ordered their noodles slightly softer for their grandmother. Every dish had a story, a connection to our community. Then came the day we reopened. I'd sent invitations to all our old regulars, including the elderly couple who told me about the safe. David and Amanda received one too, not out of spite, but because Mom would have wanted it. The dining room was full for the first time in months. I kept the worn wooden floors, the faded decorations, but added small touches. Fresh flowers, new tablecloths, subtle changes that respected tradition while embracing the future. The first dishes went out, then the second. The dining room grew quiet except for the sounds of eating and soft exclamations of pleasure. Just like Margaret used to make. No, even better. The sauce, it's perfect. David and Amanda arrived late, dressed like they were attending a funeral rather than a dinner. They sat at Mom's old favorite table, ordering with barely concealed disdain. I served them myself, Mom's special dumplings, noodles in XO sauce, and her secret braised pork. "What is this?" Amanda demanded after one bite, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "This isn't. How did you?" David was silent, staring at his plate. I saw him blink rapidly and realized he was fighting tears. "It tastes like Mom's," he whispered. "No," I said gently. "It tastes like love." That was always her secret ingredient. I placed Mom's journal on their table, open to a specific page. There, among the recipes and notes, was a letter addressed to David. "My precious son, if you're reading this, then Lucy has found my notebooks and understood their true meaning. You may think I chose her over you, but that's not true. I chose the right person to carry on, not just the restaurant, but its heart. You have your own gifts, my boy. Your drive, your intelligence, they've taken you far. But Lucy has something special. She understands that Golden Lotus isn't just a business. It's a family, a community, a legacy of love. Support her, David. She'll need your business sense sometimes, just as you might need her reminder that success isn't always measured in dollars. You are both my children, and I love you both. Different gifts, different paths, but the same heart. Love, Mom." I left them reading, returning to the kitchen where tickets were piling up. Through the service window, I watched David wipe his eyes, then slowly taste each dish again, this time with real attention. After closing, he found me in the kitchen. "Lucy, He stopped, looking around at the space where we'd grown up watching Mom cook. "I'm sorry. I thought I knew better." "I know." I touched his arm gently. "Want to learn how to make the dumplings?" Mom left instructions for both of us. He managed a small smile. "Maybe next time, but I do have some ideas about expanding the business. If you're interested." "Expanding?" "Golden Lotus sauces. Packaged for retail. Your recipes, my business connections. Mom would have loved it." I thought about the notebooks, full of family secrets and community connections. Let me think about it. Whatever we do, we have to do it right. For Mom. In the months that followed, Golden Lotus flourished. Not just survived, but truly thrived. The dining room was full every night, now with a mix of old regulars and new faces. We started a cooking class on Sundays, sharing some of Mom's simpler recipes with the community. David and I eventually did launch the sauce business, but we did it carefully, maintaining the quality Mom would have demanded. Amanda learned to make dumplings, though she complained about the flour under her manicured nails. The lucky cat still sits on its shelf in the kitchen, guarding its secrets. The safe behind it is empty now, its treasure distributed through the notebooks I use every day, adding my own notes alongside Mom's. Last week, a food critic from the Chronicle came in. His review made me cry. Golden Lotus has managed the impossible, honoring a beloved legacy while creating something new and vibrant. The classic dishes taste exactly as I remember from Margaret Chen's day, yet somehow even better. Her daughter Lucy has discovered what every great chef knows, that the secret ingredient in memorable food isn't in any recipe, it's in the heart of the person cooking it. Mom would have loved that review. Not for the praise, but for the understanding. Every night before service, I touch the lucky cat for good fortune, just like Mom used to do. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before the dinner rush, I swear I can feel her presence in the steam rising from the woks, in the rhythm of chopping vegetables, in the laughter of guests enjoying their meals. The recipes she left weren't just about food. They were about legacy, family, and the courage to believe in yourself. Every dish we serve carries a piece of that legacy, a blend of tradition and innovation, of memory and possibility. David stops by most Sundays now, sometimes rolling up his sleeves to help in the kitchen. He's not very good at dumpling folding yet, but he's learning. More importantly, he's understanding what Mom knew all along, that true success isn't measured in profit margins, but in the smiles of satisfied customers and the warmth of family working together. As for me, I've started my own notebook, adding new recipes alongside Mom's classics. Someday, I'll pass these books on to the next generation, along with the most important lesson Mom taught us, that the greatest achievements come not from proving others wrong, but from proving yourself right. The lucky cat watches over it all, guarding not just recipes now, but the true heart of Golden Lotus, a legacy of love, served one dish at a time. I never thought I'd see our family's century-old farm sold off like a cheap roadside souvenir, but that's exactly what happened last spring. Standing in our weathered kitchen, watching my parents sign away 5 generations of history to the Highland Development Corporation. I felt physically sick. "Mom, Dad, please," I begged one last time, my hands gripping the worn edges of Grandpa Joe's old oak table. "This land has been in our family since 1923. You can't just sell it to become another soulless subdivision." Mom didn't even look up from the contract, her manicured nails flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. After her promotion to senior partner at her law firm last year, she'd stopped having time for anything that didn't come with a hefty price tag attached. "Sarah, honey," she sighed, using that condescending tone that made me feel like I was still 12 instead of 28. "It's just empty farmland. The crops barely break even anymore, and the development company is offering $3 million. Do you know what we could do with that kind of money?" Dad at least had the decency to look somewhat conflicted, his weathered farmer's hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Your mother's right, Princess. Times change. We're not farmers anymore. Haven't been since your grandfather passed." The memory of Grandpa Joe hit me like a physical blow. He passed away just 6 months ago, and already they were dismantling everything he'd built. Everything he loved. "He trusted you to protect this place," I said quietly, my voice trembling. His last words were about the farm. His last words were delirious ramblings about treasure and secrets. Mom cut in sharply. "Really, Sarah, I expected this kind of romantic nonsense when you were younger, but you're an agricultural scientist now. Be practical." That was rich, coming from her. Mom hadn't spent a single day working this land. She hadn't been there during the drought of 2015 when Grandpa Joe and I worked 18-hour days to save what crops we could. She hadn't helped us dig irrigation channels or repair fences or deliver calves in the middle of the night. She hadn't been there when Grandpa Joe would sit on the old porch swing every evening, telling stories about our ancestors who'd built this place from nothing. About great-great-grandfather William Montgomery, who'd first claimed this land, who'd chosen this specific plot for reasons he'd only ever share with his own son. "The land keeps its secrets," Grandpa Joe used to say, his eyes twinkling. "And one day, when the time is right, it'll share them with someone worthy." Mr. Davidson, the development company's representative, cleared his throat politely. "Mrs. Montgomery, if you could initial here and here." His eager voice snapped me back to the present. I watched in helpless fury as my parents signed away our heritage. 500 acres of prime Pennsylvania farmland, land that had sustained our family through the Great Depression, through wars and droughts and everything in between, reduced to nothing more than dollar signs in their eyes. 30 days, Mr. Davidson said smoothly, gathering up the contracts. "We'll begin preliminary surveys next week, but you'll have 30 days to vacate the property completely. The company is happy to provide moving services, of course." "That won't be necessary," Mom replied briskly. "We've already purchased a condo in Philadelphia. Sarah can handle clearing out the farmhouse. It'll give her time to adjust to the situation." I stared at her, blindsided. They'd already bought a condo. How long have they been planning this? "Of course," Dad added quickly, "you're welcome to come live with us, Princess. There's no need for you to stay at that little research facility. With your degrees, you could get a corporate job in the city." "I'm staying at the Agricultural Research Center." I cut him off. "My work on sustainable farming practices actually matters to people who care about the land." Mom's lips thinned with disapproval. "Still throwing away your potential on playing in the dirt. At least this sale means we won't have to watch good land go to waste on your experimental organic farming notions anymore." The casual cruelty of her words left me speechless. I'd spent the last 3 years implementing new farming techniques on our land, working with the research center to prove that traditional family farms could be both sustainable and profitable. The test plots had just started showing promising results. But none of that mattered now. Not to them. Mr. Davidson stood, offering his hand to my parents. "Congratulations on the sale. Highland Development will transform this property into the most exclusive residential community in the county. The Montgomery Farm Estates will keep the name, of course, to honor the heritage." I couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing my jacket, I stormed out of the kitchen and into the crisp spring morning. The farm stretched out before me, morning mist still clinging to the fields where the first green shoots of this year's crops were just beginning to emerge. Near the old barn, a pair of red-tailed hawks circled lazily, the same mating pair that had nested on our property for the past decade. Soon their hunting grounds would be covered in concrete and asphalt, their ancient oak tree cut down to make way for some millionaire's mansion. Sarah, wait. Dad's voice called from behind me, but I kept walking, heading for the back fields where Grandpa Joe and I had spent so many hours working side by side. It was where he taught me everything he knew about farming, about respecting the land and its rhythms. The memories flooded back as I walked. I was 5 years old, sitting on his shoulders as he checked the irrigation lines. 10 years old, helping him mend fences and learning the property's boundaries. 15, driving the tractor for the first time, his patient voice guiding me through the gears. And just last year, 27 years old with a PhD in agricultural science, showing him the results of my organic farming trials. His eyes had lit up with pride as he'd examined the improved soil samples, the increased crop yields. You see it, don't you? He'd asked that day, his voice already weakened by the cancer that would take him just months later. You understand what this land can do, what it can be. I'd nodded, not realizing then that we were running out of time, that he was trying to tell me something important. A glint of metal caught my eye, pulling me from my memories. I was standing near the old stone wall that marked our property's southern boundary, and something was reflecting the morning sun. Bending down, I brushed aside some loose dirt to find a small brass key, old and green with age. My breath caught. I recognized it immediately. It was the key to Grandpa Joe's old study in the barn, the private space where he kept all his farm records and family documents, the room he'd specifically left to me in his will, though I hadn't been able to bring myself to go through it since his death. The land keeps its secrets, his voice whispered in my memory, until the time is right. Looking back toward the farmhouse, I could see the development company's sleek black SUV pulling away down our long gravel drive. My parents' car followed shortly after, heading toward their new city life without a backward glance. They'd given me 30 days to clear out generations of history, 30 days to say goodbye to everything I loved. But standing there with Grandpa Joe's key in my hand, watching the morning sun climb over fields that had sustained my family for 100 years, I felt something else stirring beneath my grief and anger. Hope. Grandpa Joe had never done anything without a reason. He'd never simply given up or taken the easy path. And in those final days, he tried to tell us something about the farm. Something my parents had dismissed as the ramblings of a dying man. But what if they were wrong? What if the land really did have secrets to share? And what if just maybe I had 30 days to discover them? The key felt warm in my palm as I closed my fingers around it, my decision made. I might not be able to stop the sale, but I could spend these last days uncovering whatever Grandpa Joe had wanted us to know. I owed him that much. I owed the land that much. Behind me, the hawks called out, their cries carrying across fields that had witnessed a century of Montgomery family history. Soon, those fields would be gone, transformed into another cookie-cutter luxury development. Unless Grandpa Joe had left behind something that could change everything. Something hidden in that old study, waiting for someone worthy to discover it. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a smile tugging at my lips. 30 days might just be enough time after all. Game on, Highland Development. Game on. The old barn study smelled exactly like I remembered. A mixture of leather, paper, and the special pipe tobacco Grandpa Joe used to smoke. Standing in the doorway, key still warm in my hand, I felt his presence all around me. The afternoon sun filtered through dusty windows, illuminating dancing motes in the air and casting long shadows across his massive oak desk. I hadn't been in here since before his passing. The room looked frozen in time, farming journals stacked neatly in one corner, his favorite leather chair still pulled away from the desk as if he'd just stepped out for a moment. A half-finished cup of coffee, long since dried up, sat next to a worn notebook. "Okay, Grandpa," I whispered, running my fingers along the desk's smooth surface. "What were you trying to tell us?" The study wasn't large, maybe 15 feet square, but every inch held purpose. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with agricultural references, family photo albums, and meticulously maintained farm records dating back decades. The 4th wall featured a large map of our property, yellowed with age but carefully preserved under glass. I started with the desk drawers, working methodically. The first 2 contained ordinary items, office supplies, more farming journals, equipment manuals. But the bottom drawer was locked. My hands trembled slightly as I tried the old brass key. It fit perfectly. Inside, I found a single leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. The inscription on the first page made my heart skip. Property of William Montgomery, 1923. My great-great-grandfather's journal. The man who first claimed this land. I carefully turned the pages, his elegant handwriting bringing the past to life. After months of searching, I finally found it. The geological surveys confirm what the old tales suggested. This land is unique. The mineral deposits alone would make a man wealthy, but that's not why I chose it. There are greater treasures here, things that must be protected. A sharp knock at the barn door made me jump. Through the study window, I could see a Highland development truck parked in our drive. Quickly tucking the journal into my bag, I headed downstairs. 2 men in corporate polo shirts were waiting, looking impatient. Miss Montgomery? The taller one stepped forward. I'm Steve Randall, Chief Surveyor for Highland. We need to begin our preliminary work today. I straightened my spine, channeling Grandpa Joe's quiet strength. The contract gives us 30 days before you can start any development work. The contract gives you 30 days to vacate, he corrected smoothly. We can begin surveys immediately. We have permits. He held up an official-looking document. My mother's signature was clearly visible at the bottom. She must have signed additional paperwork without telling me. Fine, I said tightly, but stay away from the old barn. We're still clearing out personal property. Steve's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, we'll start with the back acreage. I watched them drive their equipment toward the fields, my mind racing. The journal in my bag felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. I needed time to understand what great-great-grandfather William had discovered, what Grandpa Joe had been protecting all these years. Back in the study, I pulled out my laptop and began documenting everything while continuing to read the journal. Hours slipped by as William's story unfolded. He'd spent years researching the specific plot of land before claiming it, following historical records and geological surveys. There were detailed maps, coordinates, and references to something hidden beneath the property. But what really caught my attention were the soil samples. The mineral composition is unlike anything I've seen, William wrote. Preliminary tests suggest rare earth elements in concentrations that shouldn't be possible in this region. But there's something else, something the tests can't explain. My hands froze over the keyboard. Rare earth elements, those were crucial for modern technology. Everything from smartphones to electric cars needed them. And they were becoming increasingly scarce. A memory surfaced. Last year's soil samples from my agricultural studies. I'd noticed some unusual readings but had been focused on organic farming applications. I hadn't thought to test for mineral content. The sound of heavy machinery startled me from my research. Looking out the window, I saw several excavators moving into position near the backfields. They weren't just surveying, they were preparing to dig. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Highland's board is meeting next week to finalize construction plans. Don't interfere with their work. This is happening whether you like it or not. I started to reply, then stopped as another memory hit me. Last Christmas, Grandpa Joe insisting we watch an old documentary about mining rights and mineral laws. At the time, I thought he was just being nostalgic. Now I wondered if he'd been trying to tell us something else. Opening a new browser tab, I began researching Pennsylvania property laws. 3 hours and several legal databases later, I sat back, my mind reeling from the implications of what I'd discovered. The original deed to our property, filed by William Montgomery in 1923, included something called mineral rights in perpetuity. These rights were specifically excluded from any future sale of the surface property, meaning they still belonged to the Montgomery family trust. If there really were valuable minerals under our land, Highland Development couldn't touch them without our permission. They couldn't even dig foundations without risking a lawsuit. But I needed proof. Hard scientific evidence of what lay beneath our fields. My hands shaking with excitement, I called Dr. Chen at the Agricultural Research Center. Sarah, she answered on the first ring. I heard about the farm. I'm so sorry. I need a favor, I said quickly. Remember those unusual soil samples from last year's study? Can we run a full mineral analysis? I mean everything. Rare earth elements, heavy metals, the works. That's expensive, she cautioned, and it'll take time. I have some grant money left, and I only need a few days. Please, Dr. Chen. This is important. She sighed. Bring them in tomorrow morning. I'll see what I can do. Next, I called Tom Harrison, my best friend from college who now worked as an environmental lawyer in Pittsburgh. I need you to look at some property documents, I said without preamble, specifically mineral rights from the 1920s. How fast can you get here? I can come tomorrow, he said, concern evident in his voice. Sarah, what's going on? I think my great-great-grandfather left us something more valuable than just farmland, and I think Grandpa Joe spent his whole life protecting it. After hanging up, I returned to William's journal, reading well into the night. The more I read, the more convinced I became that he'd chosen this land for very specific reasons that could change everything. But Highland Development's machines were already here, their corporate machine rolling forward with the inevitability of a steamroller. I had days, maybe hours, before they started seriously excavating. I needed to buy time. The next morning, I was waiting when Steve Randall and his crew arrived. I'm invoking a temporary stop work order, I announced, holding up a stack of papers Tom had helped me prepare over the phone last night. Steve's face darkened. You can't do that. We have contracts. Check with your legal department, I said firmly. The mineral rights were excluded from the sale. Any excavation could be considered mining activity without proper permits. Your company could face significant fines. This is ridiculous, he snapped, but I noticed him pulling out his phone and stepping away to make a call. By that afternoon, the excavators were being moved off our land. I bought myself a few days, but I knew it was temporary. Highland Development hadn't built their empire by giving up easily. But as I watched their trucks drive away, I felt Grandpa Joe's presence beside me, almost as if he were still here, still protecting our land. I won't let you down, I whispered. I'll find what you were trying to tell us. I'll protect what's important. The hawks circled overhead, their cries carrying across fields that suddenly held more mystery than I'd ever imagined. Somewhere beneath that rich soil lay secrets that had been guarded for a century, secrets that might just save everything we held dear. And I had a feeling we were running out of time to uncover them. Are you actually serious right now? I stared at my stepdaughter Vanessa in disbelief, the words hanging between us like a physical barrier. Completely serious, she replied, arms crossed over her designer blouse. Dad would have wanted me to have the perfect wedding. And since he's not here to pay for it, the responsibility falls to you. I took a deep breath, trying to process what she was asking. Demanding, actually. My husband Richard had passed away 14 months ago after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer, leaving me to raise our twins, Max and Olivia, who had just turned 12. And now his 26-year-old daughter from his first marriage wanted me to sell our family home to fund her extravagant wedding to a man she'd been dating for less than a year. Vanessa, this house isn't just an asset. It's our home, mine and the twins. Where exactly would you expect us to live? I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. She shrugged, inspecting her manicured nails. You could rent somewhere smaller. The twins could share a room. It's temporary until you figure things out. That conversation happened 8 months ago, the first of many confrontations that led me to where I am today, standing at the back of an ostentatious church, watching my stepdaughter's wedding unfold with a document in my hand that would change everything. Richard and I had been married for 14 years. I met him when I was 30 after his first marriage to Vanessa's mother had ended in a bitter divorce. Vanessa was 12 then, the same age my twins are now, and I'd done everything I could to be a supportive stepmother despite her resistance. She just needs time, Richard would say whenever I came home crying after another one of Vanessa's cruel rejections. The divorce was hard on her. I gave her time, years of it. I attended every school event, helped with college applications, celebrated her achievements, and tried to include her in our family life after the twins were born. But Vanessa remained cold, treating me like a temporary inconvenience in her father's life rather than his wife and the mother of her half-siblings. When Richard was diagnosed, everything happened so quickly. Within 3 months he was gone, and I was left grieving while trying to help 2 confused and heartbroken children process the loss of their father. Vanessa, who had moved across the country for work years ago, flew in for the funeral and left the next day. I can't bear to be in that house without him, she'd said, not bothering to help with any arrangements or spend time with her half-siblings, who were desperate for connections to their dad. I didn't hear from her again until she called announcing her engagement to Bradley, the son of a prominent local business family she'd reconnected with at the funeral. The same call where she mentioned how perfect our spacious home would be for wedding photos. When I refused to sell our house, explaining that it would uproot the twins during an already difficult time, Vanessa exploded. "This is so typical. You've always put those kids ahead of me," she shouted through the phone. "Dad left that house to all of us, not just you and your precious twins." This wasn't technically true. Richard and I had owned the house jointly, and his will had left his share to me with the understanding that the twins would inherit it eventually. Vanessa had received a generous life insurance payout and Richard's vintage car collection, which she promptly sold. "Vanessa, your father wouldn't want your siblings to lose their home," I tried to reason. "Half-siblings," she corrected icily. "And Dad would have wanted to give me away at my dream wedding. Since he can't do that, the least you could do is make sure the wedding happens the way he would have wanted." Despite my refusal to sell, Vanessa continued with her wedding plans, repeatedly hinting that I could do the right thing and at least take out a second mortgage. When that didn't work, she started asking for loans, suggesting I dip into the twins' college funds or cash out my retirement account. "It's just sitting there anyway," she argued during one particularly heated phone call. "And Bradley's parents are expecting a wedding that matches their social standing. I can't embarrass him with something cheap." I offered what I could afford, a modest contribution that would cover the flowers or perhaps the photographer. She dismissed it as insulting. The situation reached a breaking point 3 months before the wedding. Vanessa and Bradley came for dinner, ostensibly to discuss compromises on the wedding budget. The twins were excited to see their older sister, having prepared handmade gifts to congratulate her on her engagement. "We made these for you," Olivia said shyly, presenting a scrapbook of family photos that included several of Vanessa with Richard from when she was younger. Vanessa barely glanced at it. "Thanks, I'll look at it later." Throughout dinner, she discussed the wedding as if it were a corporate merger, all spreadsheets and vendor negotiations. Bradley mostly sat in silence, occasionally giving me apologetic looks when Vanessa's demands became particularly outrageous. "The venue alone is $40,000, she explained, showing me pictures of a historic mansion. "And that's before catering, which is another $35 per head with a minimum of 200 guests. "That's more than I make in a year," I said quietly, aware of the twins listening from their end of the table. "Well, if you just sell this place, it wouldn't be an issue," Vanessa snapped. "It's too big for the 3 of you anyway." "This is our home," Max interjected, his voice small but determined. "Dad picked it out special for when we were born." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "You wouldn't even remember that. You were babies." "But we know the story," Olivia said. "Dad told us all the time. How he wanted a big yard and rooms where we could all be together, but also have our own space to grow." "Well, Dad would want me to have my dream wedding more than he'd want you to stay in some house you'll outgrow in a few years anyway," Vanessa replied dismissively. After the twins went to bed, clearly upset, the argument escalated. "I'm not selling our home, Vanessa," I said firmly. "I've offered what I can afford, and I'm sorry if it's not enough. But your father would never expect your siblings to lose their home for a one-day event." "Fine," she said coldly, gathering her things. "Then don't bother coming to the wedding. I don't want you there anyway, you or those two. You're not real family." Bradley looked uncomfortable. "Vanessa, maybe we should." "No," she cut him off. "I've made my decision. If she won't help, she's not welcome. Dad would understand." With that, she stormed out, leaving Bradley to apologize awkwardly before following her. The formal invitation arrived by email the next day, a curt message stating that due to budget constraints and venue limitations, my presence and that of the minor children would no longer be accommodated at the wedding. As if we were furniture that didn't fit the floor plan. The twins were devastated when I had to tell them, not because they were particularly excited about sitting through a wedding ceremony, but because it was one more rejection from a sister they desperately wanted to connect with, one more severed tie to their father. "Why doesn't she like us, Mom?" Olivia asked, tears streaming down her face. I had no good answer. How do you explain adult pettiness and long-held grudges to children who just want to be loved? What happened next wasn't planned, at least not initially. 2 weeks after our invitation, I received a call from my neighbor Eleanor, a retired attorney who had been a close friend of Richard's and had helped us with various legal matters over the years. "Jennifer, I just ran into Bradley's mother at the garden club," she said without preamble. She was going on about how generous you are for selling your home to give Vanessa her dream wedding. Said it was the most selfless gesture she'd ever heard of from a stepmother. My blood ran cold. "I'm not selling our house, Eleanor," Vanessa demanded. "Actually, but I refused." There was a long pause. "Well, that's not what she's telling Bradley's family. She told them you're closing on the sale next week, and the proceeds are her wedding gift. Bradley's mother is singing your praises all over town." After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to make sense of Vanessa's lie. Was she hoping to pressure me by creating this false narrative? Or was there something more sinister at work? On a hunch, I called our family attorney, who confirmed my fears. Vanessa had been making inquiries about the house's title and Richard's will, specifically looking for loopholes that might give her a claim to force a sale. "She doesn't have legal standing," he'd assured me. "The house is yours, but the fact that she's looking into this is concerning." That evening, after putting the twins to bed, I sat in Richard's old office, surrounded by the remnants of his life, books he'd loved, photos of our family, the worn leather chair where he'd read bedtime stories to the twins. And I made a decision. The next day, I contacted Eleanor and asked for her legal expertise on a rather unusual plan. Over the following weeks, as Vanessa's wedding approached, I executed my strategy quietly and methodically. I received no further communication from her, except a formal wedding invitation sent to Mrs. Jennifer Carson and family 3 weeks before the event. Clearly a gesture meant for Bradley's family to see rather than a genuine inclusion. I RSVP for myself only, sending a polite note that the children have prior commitments rather than mentioning they'd been explicitly uninvited previously. The day of the wedding arrived, bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a modest navy dress, arranged for my parents to watch the twins, and drove to the historic mansion Vanessa had chosen for her ceremony. The venue was exactly as extravagant as she described. Floral arrangements larger than my dining table adorned every surface. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and a string quartet played softly as guests in designer attire mingled in the garden. I took a seat near the back of the ceremony area, the envelope in my handbag feeling impossibly heavy. Several of Richard's relatives nodded in my direction, their expressions a mix of surprise and sympathy. They'd all received the same story about my generous gift of selling my home. The ceremony proceeded with all the pomp Vanessa had dreamed of: 6 bridesmaids in champagne silk, a custom-designed gown with a cathedral train, and vows clearly written to impress rather than express genuine emotion. As the officiant asked if anyone had reason to object to the union, I remained silent. This wasn't about stopping the wedding. It was about truth. The reception that followed was held in the mansion's grand ballroom. I waited until dinner was served and the father of the bride's speech would traditionally have occurred. In Richard's absence, Bradley's father stood to offer words of welcome to Vanessa. "We're so happy to welcome Vanessa into our family," he said, champagne glass raised, "and we're moved by the incredible sacrifice her stepmother Jennifer has made to ensure today was everything Vanessa dreamed of. Selling your family home to give your stepdaughter her perfect day. There's no greater testament to family love than that." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's smile froze on her face as she spotted me at the back table. This clearly wasn't part of her plan. She'd assumed I'd be seated far from the main party, not witnessing this public acknowledgement of a lie. When Bradley's father finished, the event coordinator announced it was time for toasts from other family members. Before anyone else could stand, I rose from my seat, envelope in hand. "I'd like to say a few words," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. Vanessa's eyes widened in panic as I made my way to the front of the room. Bradley looked confused, glancing between his new wife and me. "For those who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Carson, Richard's widow and Vanessa's stepmother," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "First, I want to congratulate Vanessa and Bradley on their marriage and wish them every happiness." I paused, making eye contact with Bradley's parents, who were beaming at me with approval. "I've heard there's been some confusion about a wedding gift from me," I continued. "Specifically, about the sale of our family home." Vanessa half rose from her seat, but Bradley placed a restraining hand on her arm, his expression darkening as he began to understand the implications. "I want to clarify that I have not sold my home to pay for today's celebration," I said clearly. That home is where my children, Vanessa's half-siblings, and I still live. It's the home Richard and I built together, where we raised our family and where his memory lives on in every room. The room had gone completely silent. Bradley's mother's smile had faded to confusion. However, I continued, opening the envelope I'd brought. I did make a decision about property recently. Richard owned a vacation cabin in the mountains that was separate from our primary residence. He and I spent our honeymoon there, and we took the twins there every summer. It was his special place. I withdrew the document from the envelope. I've decided that this property should benefit all of Richard's children. So while I haven't sold our family home, I have transferred ownership of the cabin to a trust. Vanessa's expression shifted from panic to calculation, clearly assuming the trust would benefit her financially. This trust, I continued, will maintain the property as a retreat for families dealing with childhood grief and loss. It will be named for Richard and operated by the Children's Bereavement Center that helped Max and Olivia after their father's death. I held up the trust document for everyone to see. The property belongs to someone else now, to children who need a safe place to heal, just as Richard would have wanted. I've made this donation in honor of today's marriage as my gift to the couple. The implications were clear. There would be no windfall for Vanessa, no property she could leverage or sell. Instead, her father's beloved cabin would help children like the half-siblings she rejected. Bradley's parents were the first to react, rising to their feet with genuine applause. Others joined, perhaps not fully understanding the subtext but appreciating the charitable gesture. Bradley himself looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted. Vanessa sat rigid in her chair, a brutal smile fixed on her face as she realized her lies had been exposed in the gentlest, most public way possible. After returning to my seat, I stayed only long enough to finish my meal and accept genuine thanks from Bradley's parents, who seemed oblivious to the tension between Vanessa and me. As I prepared to leave, Bradley approached alone. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" I asked, surprised. "For not saying everything you could have." He glanced back at Vanessa, who was determinedly mingling with guests, as if nothing had happened. "I didn't know about the lies regarding your house. I would never have gone along with that." I studied his face, seeing genuine regret there. "I hope you'll be happy, Bradley, and I hope Vanessa finds peace with whatever she's been carrying all these years." "The twins," he said hesitantly. "I'd like to meet them properly sometime. They're my family now, too." It was an olive branch I hadn't expected. They'd like that. 3 months have passed since the wedding. Vanessa and Bradley returned from their honeymoon to find their social circle well aware that there had been no sacrifice of a family home, though most were tactful enough not to mention it directly. Bradley has kept his word about wanting to know his new siblings, coming for dinner twice and even taking Max to a baseball game. Vanessa hasn't joined him, but she did send birthday cards to the twins last month, the first acknowledgement of their special day in years. The cabin has been renovated to accommodate small groups of children and their families, with the first grief retreat scheduled for next month. The twins have helped with the preparations, picking out games and books they think other kids might find comforting. "Do you think Dad would be happy about what we did with the cabin?" Olivia asked me recently as we sorted through old photos for the retreat center's walls. I showed her a picture of Richard at the cabin, arms spread wide as if embracing the mountains behind him, his face alight with joy. "I think he would love knowing his special place is helping children heal," I told her honestly. "Your dad believed homes weren't just buildings. They were places where people could feel safe, loved, and remembered." "Even Vanessa?" Max asked, surprising me with his insight. "Even Vanessa," I agreed, "maybe especially Vanessa." Last week, an envelope arrived in the mail, a check from Vanessa with a brief note, "For the cabin trust. Not all dreams need to cost a fortune." It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But as I deposited the check into the trust account, I recognized it for what it was, a small step across the chasm that had separated our family for so long. Richard would have understood. I'd always been the odd one out in my family. While my older sisters Diane and Rebecca both followed our parents' well-trodden path into corporate law, I chose a different direction, pursuing my passion for sustainable architecture. According to my family, this made me the creative but impractical one, the sister who could never quite get her life together. "Maya, honey, when are you going to get a real job?" Mom would ask during our monthly family dinners, despite the fact that I've been working at the same architecture firm for 7 years. "Architecture is a real job, Mom," I'd reply with practiced patience. Of course it is, sweetie, she'd say in that tone that meant the exact opposite. But is it stable? It didn't matter that I'd helped design award-winning sustainable buildings across the country. It didn't matter that I lived comfortably within my means in a modest but beautifully renovated apartment, because I didn't match their definition of success. Corner office, six-figure salary, luxury car. They viewed my life choices with a mixture of confusion and pity. My sisters were particularly vocal about my supposed financial instability. Diane, the eldest at 37, never missed an opportunity to remind everyone about her latest bonus or vacation home purchase. Rebecca, 35, was more subtle but equally condescending, offering to help me with my budget whenever I mentioned any purchase larger than a coffee. I learned to brush off their comments over the years, focusing instead on building a life that made me happy rather than one that impressed them. But what happened last spring still makes my blood boil when I think about it. It started with a family dinner in March. Diane had just received a promotion and was in rare form, dominating the conversation with tales of her corporate heroics. So to celebrate, she announced, clinking her fork against her wine glass dramatically, "I've decided to treat the family to a luxury vacation in Bali this summer. 2 weeks at a 5-star resort, all expenses paid." Our parents beamed with pride while Rebecca gasped in delight. "That's incredibly generous, Diane." "Well, it's important to share success with the people who matter," Diane replied, smiling broadly. I waited for her to look in my direction, to include me in the invitation. Instead, an uncomfortable silence fell over the table as everyone suddenly became very interested in their plates. "Maya," Diane finally said, her voice taking on a delicate tone that immediately put me on edge, "we were thinking this trip might be a bit much for your situation." "My situation?" I repeated, setting down my fork. "You know," Rebecca chimed in with fox concern, "with your career being more passion-driven than profit-driven. The time off alone would be a financial hit for you. Not to mention the spending money you'd need," Diane added. "We're planning some exclusive excursions that are quite costly." I felt heat rising to my face as I realized what was happening. "Are you saying I'm not invited to the family vacation because you think I can't afford it?" No, Mom interjected quickly. "They're just concerned about putting you in an awkward position." "We know how independent you are," Dad added, clearly uncomfortable. "You wouldn't want us paying your way." "Even though we absolutely would," Diane said with artificial sweetness that made my teeth hurt. "But we know your pride wouldn't allow it." The assumption was so wildly off base that I almost laughed. While I lived more modestly than my sisters by choice, I was far from struggling financially. In fact, thanks to some smart investments and my habit of saving rather than showing off, I was in an excellent financial position. But before I could correct their misperception, Rebecca spoke up again. "Actually, Maya, there is something you could help us with while we're away." I should have seen it coming. "Both our regular nannies are unavailable those weeks," she continued, "and we were hoping you might watch the kids. They love their Auntie Maya, and we pay you, of course." 5 children, 2 weeks, while they sipped cocktails on a Balinese beach. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "I'm not invited on the family vacation because you think I can't afford it, but you want me to babysit your children for 2 weeks while you're all gone." "When you put it that way, it sounds terrible," Diane laughed, waving her hand dismissively. "Think of it as house-sitting with benefits. You get to stay in our homes, use our pools. We'd stock the fridges," Rebecca added helpfully. I looked around the table, waiting for anyone, to acknowledge the absurdity of the situation. Instead, they were all nodding as if this was a perfectly reasonable arrangement. "I'll have to check my schedule," I managed to say, which they immediately interpreted as agreement. The conversation moved on, but I remained silent for the rest of the meal, a plan already forming in my mind. Over the next few weeks, Diane and Rebecca ramped up their vacation planning, creating a family group chat that excluded me where they shared resort photos and excursion options. Meanwhile, they created a separate chat with just me to coordinate the childcare details, when to pick up each child, their schedules, dietary restrictions, and an ever-growing list of rules and requirements. I responded politely but non-committally, neither agreeing to nor refusing their requests outright. Whenever they pressed for confirmation, I'd cite work commitments that I needed to sort out first. "This is exactly why you need a more structured career path," Diane texted after I mentioned potential work conflicts. Corporate jobs have clear vacation policies. I didn't bother explaining that my unstructured career had actually given me considerable flexibility and autonomy. I was saving that revelation for later. A month before their scheduled departure, I finally agreed to meet them for coffee to finalize the arrangements. They arrived with color-coded binders for each child, looking relieved that their child care plan was coming together. "We can't thank you enough, Maya," Rebecca said, sliding a binder across the table. "The kids are so excited to have their fun aunt staying with them." "About that," I said, taking a sip of my coffee, "I'm afraid I won't be able to watch the children after all." Their expressions fell in perfect synchronization. "What do you mean?" Diane demanded. "We've been planning this for months." "No, you've been planning this for months," I corrected her. "I never actually agreed to it. I said I needed to check my schedule, and I have. It turns out I'll be out of the country those weeks." "Out of the country?" Rebecca echoed incredulously. "Where could you possibly be going?" I smiled. "Bali, actually." The silence that followed was deeply satisfying. "That's not funny, Maya," Diane finally said. "I'm not joking. I've booked my own trip to Bali. Different resort, different dates. I'm leaving a week before you and staying a week longer, actually." "But how can you afford?" Rebecca caught herself, but not quickly enough. "Afford it?" I finished for her. "Quite easily, as it happens. Contrary to what you all seem to believe, I'm not struggling financially. I may not flaunt my money like you do, but that doesn't mean I don't have any." Their disbelief would have been comical if it wasn't so insulting. "You should call a professional childcare service," I suggested, gathering my bag. "They'll need some advance notice." I left them sitting there, mouths still slightly agape, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next few weeks brought a barrage of texts and calls. First from my sisters, then from my parents when their appeals failed to move me. The messaging evolved from indignation to guilt-tripping to, finally, grudging offers to include me in their trip after all. "We never meant to exclude you," Diane claimed in a particularly revisionist voicemail. There must have been a misunderstanding. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I focused on my own travel preparations and a special project I'd been working on in my spare time. As the departure date approached, my mother called with one last attempt at reconciliation. "Your sisters feel terrible about the misunderstanding, Maya. They want to make it right. Won't you at least come to the airport to see everyone off? The children would love to say goodbye to their aunt." I considered refusing, but the opportunity was too perfect to pass up. "Sure, Mom. I'd be happy to." The morning of their departure, I arrived at the international terminal dressed casually but tastefully, a simple envelope in my hand. My parents and sisters were already there with their mountain of luggage and 5 overexcited children running in circles around them. Auntie Maya, my nieces and nephews cried in unison when they spotted me, rushing over for hugs. "We're going on an airplane to see monkeys," my youngest nephew informed me solemnly. "That sounds amazing, buddy," I said, giving him an extra squeeze. My sisters approached more cautiously, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and forced cordiality. "Thanks for coming to see us off," Diane said stiffly. "The kids are thrilled." I nodded, then held out the envelope. "I brought something for you, a parting gift." Rebecca took it, eyeing me suspiciously. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside was a detailed financial portfolio statement with my name at the top. I'd redacted some personal information but left the totals clearly visible: my investment accounts, retirement funds, property equity, and liquid assets. The bottom line was highlighted in yellow, a number that made both my sisters' eyes widen. "Is this real?" Diane asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Completely. I've been investing since I was 22, living below my means, making smart choices with my money instead of showing it off." I took the paper back and returned it to the envelope. "I could buy that resort you're staying at if I wanted to. But unlike some people, I don't measure my worth or others by their bank accounts." The airport announcement system called their flight for boarding, but neither of my sisters moved, still processing what they'd just seen. "Maya, we had no idea," Rebecca began. "That was the point." I cut her off. "You never bothered to ask. You assumed that because I chose a different path, I must be struggling. You excluded me from a family vacation because of your own biases and then expected me to be grateful for the chance to babysit your children while you enjoyed yourselves." "We made a mistake," Diane admitted, looking genuinely contrite for perhaps the first time in her adult life. We should have included you. Yes, you should have. Not because I can afford it, but because I'm your sister. The boarding announcement repeated, more urgently this time. You should get going, I said, stepping back. Wouldn't want to miss your flight. Wait, Rebecca said suddenly. If you're so financially secure, why did you let us believe otherwise all these years? Why live in that small apartment and drive that old car? I smiled. Because I value experiences over possessions, sustainability over excess, and authenticity over appearances. My life looks exactly the way I want it to, whether you understand that or not. With that, I hugged each of my nieces and nephews, promised to bring them souvenirs from my own Bali trip, and walked away, leaving my sisters to make a mad dash for their gate. They missed their flight. I know this because I was already relaxing in the airline lounge, waiting for my own departure later that day. I'd actually changed my plans when Mom had convinced me to come to the airport. Why drive there twice? My flight to Bali, in business class, wasn't leaving for another 4 hours. As I sipped my complimentary champagne, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Girls missed their flight. Rebooking for tomorrow. What did you say to them? I didn't reply. Some lessons are worth missing a flight for. My time in Bali was transformative, not because of the luxury resort or the infinity pool, though those were nice, but because for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely free of my family's expectations and judgments. I hiked through rice terraces, learned traditional cooking techniques from local chefs, participated in a community-led reforestation project, and sketched designs for my own sustainable tiny house that I'd been dreaming about building. I returned home renewed and more certain than ever about my chosen path. 2 days after I got back, there was a knock at my apartment door. I opened it to find both my sisters standing awkwardly in the hallway, looking uncharacteristically humble. "Can we come in?" Diane asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let them enter. They looked around my modest apartment with new eyes, not with pity or condescension, but with curiosity and perhaps a touch of envy at the evident thought and care in every detail, from the living wall of plants to the custom-built furniture I'd designed myself. "Your place is actually really beautiful," Rebecca admitted, running her hand along the reclaimed wood counter I'd installed. "Thank you." An uncomfortable silence fell until Diane finally spoke. "We owe you an apology, a big one." "Yes, you do," I agreed, not making it easier for them. "We were wrong to exclude you from the trip based on assumptions about your finances," Rebecca said, "and even more wrong to then expect you to watch our children." "It was entitled and thoughtless," Diane added. "And when we saw your portfolio," she shook her head, "it was a wake-up call about how little we actually knew about your life." I studied their faces, looking for the sincerity I'd rarely seen from them before. Surprisingly, it seemed genuine. Bali was enlightening, Rebecca continued. Being there, seeing a different culture, it made me realize how caught up we've been in a very narrow definition of success. Our kids wouldn't stop talking about how cool Auntie Maya's job is, designing buildings that help the environment, Diane said with a hint of a smile. Jackson told his entire kids club that his aunt is saving the planet while we just push papers around. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Kids have a way of cutting to the truth. "We'd like to start over," Rebecca said hesitantly. "Get to know the sister we apparently never bothered to understand. Maybe you could show us what you actually do," Diane suggested. "Your current projects. We've never really asked, and that's on us." I considered their offer. Years of dismissal and judgment couldn't be erased with one apology. But people can change when their perspectives are forcibly shifted. And while I have found peace in my independence, there was a part of me that had always wished for a genuine connection with my sisters. "I'm working on designs for a community of affordable, sustainable homes," I said finally. "I could show you the site next weekend, if you're free." The relief on their faces was palpable. "We'll be there," they promised in unison. As they prepared to leave, Diane paused at the door. "One more thing. Dad's 70th birthday is coming up next month. We were thinking of a family trip to the California wine country, a real family trip this time. Would you help us plan it? You've always had better taste than we have." I smiled, nodding. "I'd like that." After they left, I sat in my living room surrounded by the life I'd built for myself. Modest by their standards, perhaps, but intentional and fulfilling in ways they were only beginning to understand. The path to rebuilding our relationship would be long, but for the first time, it seemed possible. Sometimes the most effective revenge isn't about getting even, but about finally being seen for who you truly are. 2 weeks later, I met my sisters at the construction site for my sustainable housing project. They showed up wearing impractical shoes and looking out of place among the dirt and building materials. But they were there, asking questions, listening intently as I explained the solar systems and water reclamation designs. "This is actually incredible, Maya," Diane said, genuine admiration in her voice as she studied the plans. "You're building homes people can actually afford that don't destroy the planet." "Meanwhile, we're helping billionaires become trillionaires," Rebecca added with a self-deprecating laugh. As we walked back to our cars, Rebecca linked her arm through mine, a small gesture that would have seemed impossible months ago. "You know what Jackson asked me yesterday?" Diane said, brushing dust from her sleeve. "He wanted to know if it was too late for Mommy to become an architect like Auntie Maya." I raised an eyebrow. "And what did you tell him?" She smiled. "I told him it's never too late to follow a better path." Nothing had changed overnight. My sisters still lived in their mansions and worked their high-powered jobs. I still preferred my sustainable apartment and meaningful career. But something fundamental had shifted in how we saw each other, not as competitors on the same narrow track, but as women who had chosen different paths worth respecting. And really, that acknowledgement was worth more than any luxury vacation could ever be. The worst part about betrayal isn't the pain. It's the confusion. That moment when everything you thought you knew about someone shatters, leaving you to wonder if any of it was ever real. I had that moment 6 months ago, watching my sister Amy systematically destroy everything I'd worked for, all while claiming she was a victim. I'm Charlotte Bennett, and this is the story of how my sister tried to ruin my life, not realizing I had proof of what she'd really done. Growing up, Amy and I were the closest of sisters despite being complete opposites. I was the quiet one, spending hours with my nose in books, dreaming of becoming an architect. Amy was the social butterfly, captain of the cheerleading squad, always the center of attention. We balanced each other out, my calm to her chaos, her spontaneity to my planning. "You're so lucky to have each other," people would say. Sisters who were best friends. And we were best friends through high school, through college, through the early years of our careers. At least that's what I thought. The problem started 3 years ago when we both ended up at Matthews & Stone, one of the top architectural firms in Boston. I was hired as a junior architect, having spent years building my portfolio and reputation. Amy joined the marketing department, handling client relations and social media. At first, it was great having my sister at the same company. We'd meet for lunch, swap office gossip, support each other through tough projects. Then I met James. James Harrison was the firm's rising star, a brilliant architect with a vision for sustainable urban development that aligned perfectly with mine. We started collaborating on projects, our professional chemistry obvious to everyone. The personal chemistry developed more slowly, built on late nights reviewing plans and shared passion for transforming cities. "He's totally into you," Amy would tease during our lunch breaks. "You should go for it." So I did. James and I started dating, keeping it professional at work, but growing closer outside the office. After a year, he proposed. Amy was the first person I told, squealing with excitement as I showed her the ring. "I'm so happy for you." She hugged me tight. "You deserve this, Char. All of it." Looking back, I should have noticed how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The engagement coincided with a major opportunity at work. Matthews & Stone was competing to design Boston's new Civic Center, a prestigious project that would put the winning team on the map. James and I were chosen to lead the bid, our complementary styles and shared vision making us the natural choice. That's when things started going wrong. First, our preliminary designs disappeared from the secure server. It eventually recovered them, but we lost 3 crucial days of work. Then key client meetings got mysteriously rescheduled without our knowledge. Emails went missing, presentations got corrupted, deadlines got confused. Mercury must be in retrograde or something, Amy said when I complained about our string of bad luck. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll pull it together. The final presentation was a disaster. Somehow, our carefully prepared materials were replaced with an earlier unfinished version. We looked unprofessional, unprepared. The Civic Center project went to another firm. James was devastated. I was furious. The partners were disappointed. And Amy was sympathetic, but there was something off about her response. "Maybe it's for the best," she said over drinks that night. "You've been so stressed about the wedding planning anyway. Now you can focus on that." The wedding. I'd almost forgotten how many strange things had been happening with that too. Vendors claiming they'd received cancellation emails from me, deposits going missing, last-minute problems with everything from the flower arrangements to the caterer's menu. "Wedding planning is always chaotic," my mother said when I mentioned the issues. "Thank goodness Amy's helping you sort everything out." Yes, Amy had inserted herself into every aspect of the wedding planning, offering to handle communications with vendors, saying she wanted to take stress off my plate. I'd been grateful at the time, too busy with work to question it. Then came the incident that changed everything. I was working late one night, trying to rebuild our reputation after the Civic Center disaster. The office was empty except for the cleaning staff. And unexpectedly, I found her in my office, at my computer. "Oh," she jumped when I walked in. "I was just looking for that vendor spreadsheet for the wedding." Something about her reaction felt wrong. The vendor information was in our shared Google Doc. She had no reason to be on my work computer. But before I could question it, she rushed out, saying she was late for drinks with friends. The next morning, James was called into a partner meeting. Someone had reported us for ethical violations, claiming we'd stolen design elements from competitors for the Civic Center bid. They had screenshots of emails, documents that seemed to prove it. We were suspended pending investigation. "I can't believe you'd do this to me," James said later, his voice cold. "Those emails came from your account, Charlotte, your computer." "I didn't. You know I wouldn't." But the evidence looked damning. And in the middle of it all, Amy played the supportive sister perfectly, defending me to anyone who would listen, all while subtly spreading doubt. "I just don't understand it," she'd say to colleagues. "Charlotte's always been so honest." The pressure must have gotten to her. The investigation dragged on. James and I were cleared of the most serious charges. The partners accepted that the emails could have been planted. But our reputations were damaged. The trust was broken. "I need time to think," James said, removing his engagement ring. "About us, about everything." I went home that night to find Amy in my apartment, ostensibly bringing comfort food and sympathy. She hugged me as I cried, stroked my hair, told me everything would work out. "Maybe James isn't the right one anyway," she said softly. "If he doesn't trust you." That's when I saw it. A flash of satisfaction in her eyes, quickly hidden behind sisterly concern. In that moment, all the strange incidents of the past months suddenly connected like dots in a sinister drawing. The missing designs, the corrupted presentations, the vendor problems, the planted emails. It couldn't be, could it? But I had to be sure. The next day, I called in a favor from Marcus, our head of its security. I'd helped design his house last year, a project I'd done on the side. "Something's not right," I told him. "I need to know who's accessed my computer, my emails, everything." Marcus hesitated. "That's not exactly." "Please, my career and relationship are falling apart. I need to know the truth." He agreed to help, setting up monitoring software and recovering deleted security logs. He also helped me install discrete cameras in my office, their feeds backing up to a secure cloud server. Then I waited, watching, gathering evidence. The rehearsal dinner was in 2 days. Despite everything, we decided to go ahead with the wedding, James agreeing to try to work things out. Amy had been particularly insistent about keeping the date. "You can't let a little work drama ruin your special day," she'd said. "Trust me, I have everything under control." Those words should have terrified me. But for once, I was counting on my sister's need for control, her compulsion to be the center of attention. Because I knew something she didn't, the cameras had caught everything. Every late-night visit to my office, every deleted file, every planted email. And more importantly, they'd caught her phone calls, the ones she made when she thought she was alone. The story they told was worse than I'd imagined. The security footage told a story so twisted I could hardly believe it was real. Hours of video showing Amy in my office late at night, methodically sabotaging my work, planting false evidence, making calls to project clients to sow doubt about our team's integrity. But it was the phone conversations that revealed the true depth of her betrayal. "Everything's going according to plan," she'd said in one call, thinking she was alone in my office. Charlotte's career is in shambles. James is doubting everything. Soon he'll realize I'm the one he should have been with all along. Marcus had recovered her deleted emails too. Messages to vendors canceling services for my wedding, correspondence with competitors during the Civic Center bid, even a fake email account she created in my name to send incriminating messages. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Marcus asked as he helped me compile the evidence. "She's your sister." "Not anymore," I said quietly. She stopped being my sister the moment she decided to destroy my life. The rehearsal dinner was at La Maison, an upscale French restaurant downtown. Amy had insisted on handling the arrangements naturally. As guests arrived, I noticed she'd seated herself next to James at the main table, with me relegated to the far end. James looked uncomfortable but resigned. We'd barely spoken in the past week, the weight of unresolved suspicions hanging between us. My parents chatted nervously, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Amy was radiant, playing the devoted sister and maid of honor to perfection. She even prepared a speech, she announced, something special she wanted to share with everyone. I let her start, let her stand there in her designer dress, champagne glass raised, all eyes on her, just how she liked it. "I've known Charlotte all my life," she began, her voice thick with fake emotion. "We've shared everything. Secrets, dreams, even our workplace. That's why this is so difficult." She paused dramatically, pulling out a folder. "But sometimes love means telling hard truths. I've discovered evidence that my sister, that Charlotte, has been lying to all of us." Gasps around the room. James went pale. My parents looked stricken. "These documents prove that Charlotte not only stole designs from competitors," Emmy continued, "but she's been embezzling from our wedding fund, canceling vendors and keeping the deposits." "That's quite a story," I said, standing slowly. "Why don't we watch a movie instead?" Before she could respond, I nodded to Marcus, who started the video projection we'd set up. The screen came to life with crystal clear security footage. There was Amy sneaking into my office at midnight, Amy deleting files from my computer, Amy making calls on her cell phone. "No, this is Charlotte Bennett. I need to cancel my contract." "Yes, keep the deposit." "No, don't try to contact me directly." The color drained from her face as her own voice filled the room. "James should have been mine. We had a connection at the office Christmas party last year. I know he felt it too. But then little Miss Perfect had to swoop in." More footage played. Emmy sending emails from my computer. Emmy planting false documents. Emmy laughing on the phone about how perfectly her plan was working. "Turn it off," she whispered. "Why?" I asked. "Isn't this the truth you wanted to share?" The room had gone deadly quiet. James was staring at Amy with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. My parents looked like they'd been slapped. "I can explain," Amy started, but her voice cracked. "Let me explain," I said, my voice carrying in a silence. "You couldn't stand that I was succeeding on my own merits, that James chose me, that for once in our lives I had something you wanted and couldn't take. That's not. I never." "Never what?" "Never sabotaged my career, never tried to ruin my relationship, never betrayed your own sister out of jealousy and spite." I played one final clip. Amy in my office just yesterday, practicing her rehearsal dinner speech, gloating about how this would be her masterpiece, her final triumph. "I'd say your performance was brilliant," I continued as the screen went dark. "But brilliance requires originality. All you've done is play the same role you always have. The center of attention, the star of the show. Only this time you went too far." The partners from Matthews and Stone were in attendance. My guests, though Amy hadn't known that when she planned seating. They looked thunderous as they approached her. "Ms. Bennett," the senior partner said, "I suggest you come to our office first thing Monday morning to discuss your employment status and bring your lawyer." James stood up, finally finding his voice. "Charlotte, I am so sorry. I should have trusted you." "Yes," I agreed, "you should have." My parents were crying quietly in their seats. Mom reached for Amy, but she jerked away, her composure finally cracking. "You always got everything," she screamed at me. "The grades, the career, the perfect relationship. It wasn't fair. I just wanted what I earned. I finished for her. What I worked for. While you were partying through college and expecting things to be handed to you, I was building my career. While you were flirting with every man in the office, I was developing a real relationship. The only thing that wasn't fair was having a sister who'd rather destroy me than see me succeed. Security arrived, Marcus's final arrangement. They escorted Amy out as she continued to scream about unfairness and betrayal, her mascara running down her face. The aftermath was both easier and harder than I'd expected. Matthews and Stone launched a full investigation, eventually firing Amy and clearing my name completely. Several vendors came forward with recordings of her cancellation calls, and the missing deposits were traced to an account she opened in my name. James and I postponed the wedding, opting for counseling to rebuild our trust. He's working hard to make amends for doubting me, understanding now how skillfully Amy had manipulated everyone. My parents, that's been the hardest part. They're in therapy too, trying to understand how they missed the signs, how their parenting may have contributed to Amy's sense of entitlement and competitiveness. We always said you were lucky to have each other, Mom told me sadly. Maybe we should have taught you both to be worthy of having each other instead. Amy moved across the country after everything came out. Last I heard, she's working at a small marketing firm, under strict supervision. She still maintains she was the victim somehow, that I drove her to it by being too perfect. The wedding finally happened 6 months later, smaller, more intimate, but more genuine. Instead of a maid of honor, I had my closest friends stand with me. People who had supported me through everything. Who had seen through Amy's manipulations even when I couldn't. During the reception, James pulled me aside to show me something. A small album of security photos Marcus had given him, showing me working late nights on the Civic Center project, completely focused, passionate about my work. This is why I fell in love with you, he said. Not because of grand gestures or dramatic scenes, but because of your quiet dedication, your genuine passion for what you do. We're back at Matthews and Stone, our reputations not just restored but enhanced by how we handled the crisis. The partners have put us in charge of a new sustainable housing project, bigger than the Civic Center would have been. Yesterday, I found an old photo of Amy and me as kids, grinning at the camera with ice cream on our faces. Sometimes I miss that sister, the one who shared secrets and dreams before jealousy poisoned everything. But then I remember that person never really existed. She was just another role Amy was playing, waiting for her chance to steal the spotlight. The security cameras are gone from my office now, but I've kept one small reminder of everything that happened. On my desk sits a simple frame containing a fortune cookie message I got the day I decided to investigate Amy's betrayal. The truth has a way of coming to light. The only question is whether you're ready to see it. I was ready. It hurt, it changed everything, but it also set me free. Free from manipulation, free from false loyalty, free from the exhausting task of managing Amy's endless need for attention and validation. Last week, a young intern came to me for advice about office politics and difficult colleagues. I thought carefully before answering. Success isn't about defeating others, I told her. It's about being someone who can face herself in the mirror every morning, knowing she's earned her place through hard work and integrity. Amy never understood that. She was so busy trying to take what others had that she never built anything of her own. That's the real tragedy, not that she betrayed me, but that she betrayed herself, becoming exactly the kind of person she always accused others of being. As for me, I'm building things again, buildings, relationships, a life based on truth rather than competition. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better, about refusing to let someone else's darkness dim your light. The truth may hurt, but lies destroy. I chose truth. And in the end, that made all the difference. I never expected to become my grandmother's caretaker at 28. I had a promising career as an environmental engineer in Chicago, a small but trendy apartment, and a life that was finally finding its rhythm after years of hard work. But when Grandma Ellie called to tell me she'd fallen and broken her hip, everything changed. It's nothing serious, Sam, she'd insisted over the phone, her voice weak despite her efforts to sound strong. The doctor says I'll be fine after some rest. But I knew better. At 84, a broken hip was serious, and Grandma Ellie lived alone on the old family farm in rural Oklahoma, 20 miles from the nearest hospital and far from any relatives. The 100-acre farm had been in our family for 3 generations, though the actual farming had stopped years ago when Grandpa died. Now it was just Grandma in that big old farmhouse, surrounded by empty fields and memories. I took a leave of absence from my job and flew home the next day. The plan was to stay for 2 weeks, help Grandma get set up with in-home care, and return to my life. 2 weeks turned into a month turned into 3, and gradually I realized I couldn't leave her. "You're throwing your life away," my mother declared during one of her rare visits. Mom had moved to Phoenix years ago, preferring desert heat to Oklahoma dust. "Ellie needs to be in a nursing home. You need to be building your career." "I'm not throwing anything away," I replied, setting a cup of tea in front of her. "I'm working remotely, and Grandma's getting better every day." Mom snorted. "On that engineer's salary, taking care of an old woman and a money pit of a farm." "Be realistic, Samantha." That was my mother, always practical, always focused on financial security. She'd grown up on this farm and couldn't wait to escape it. In her eyes, my decision to stay was incomprehensible. My Uncle Peter was even worse. He called monthly from his vacation home in Florida, ostensibly to check on Grandma, but really to suggest listing the farm for sale. "That property's worth good money, Sam," he'd say, as if I didn't know. "Not the house. That's falling apart. But the land. Developers would snatch it up. Ellie could live comfortably in a nice facility, and there'd be plenty left over." By plenty left over, he meant his inheritance. Uncle Peter had never hidden his expectation that, as Grandma's only son, he deserved the lion's share of whatever she left behind. Then there were my cousins, Jessica and Mark, who visited on holidays with expensive gifts and loud voices, filling a quiet farmhouse with forced cheer before disappearing back to their busy lives. They never stayed long enough to help with Grandma's physical therapy or medication management. They certainly never emptied a bedpan or helped her bathe when she was too weak to do it herself. "You're a saint, Sam," Jessica would say, air kissing my cheek on her way out. "I don't know how you do it. Don't you get bored out here with nothing happening?" But there was plenty happening, just not the kind of excitement Jessica would recognize. There was Grandma regaining her ability to walk unassisted. There was the victory of her first trip up the stairs without pain. There was the garden we planted together, Grandma directing from her chair while I dug in the rich Oklahoma soil. And there were the stories. In the quiet evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over the empty fields, Grandma Ellie told me about her life. Stories I'd never heard before. About how she'd met Grandpa at a dance during World War II. About the early years on the farm when drought nearly ruined them. About the oil companies that had approached them decades ago, offering to buy mineral rights, and how Grandpa had steadfastly refused. "Edgar always said this land was our legacy, not something to be exploited," she explained, her weathered hands smoothing the quilt across her lap. "He wanted to pass it down intact, the way his father passed it to him." What she didn't tell me, what none of us knew, was that Grandpa hadn't simply refused those oil companies. He'd made a different kind of deal altogether. I found out a year later when Grandma Ellie passed away peacefully in her sleep. I'd been with her until the end, holding her hand as she drifted off, whispering that she was loved. The pain of losing her was sharp and deep, a physical ache that made it hard to breathe. The funeral was held in the small church where Grandma had attended services for over 60 years. The pews were filled with neighbors and friends, people whose lives she touched with her quiet kindness. My family was there too, of course. Mom flying in from Phoenix, Uncle Peter from Florida, cousins Jessica and Mark from their respective cities. "You look exhausted," Mom commented, eyeing me critically. "When was the last time you had a proper haircut?" I ignored the question, too tired for her particular brand of concern. I'd spent the last year caring for Grandma, watching her good days slowly become fewer than her bad ones. A haircut hadn't been a priority. After the service, everyone gathered at the farmhouse. It was the first time in years that the old place was full of people, the rooms echoing with voices instead of silence. I moved through the crowd in a daze, accepting condolences and trying to be a good host despite my grief. "Have you thought about what you'll do now?" Uncle Peter cornered me in the kitchen as I was refilling the coffee pot. "With Ellie gone, there's no reason for you to stay here." "I haven't decided," I said truthfully. My job in Chicago had long since been filled by someone else. The farm was the closest thing I had to a home now. "Well, don't make any hasty decisions," he advised, lowering his voice. "I've been talking to a developer who's very interested in this property. Once the will is settled, we could all do very well." I just nodded, too emotionally drained to argue. Let him have his plans. The truth was, I had no idea what Grandma's will contained. She'd updated it 6 months ago with her lawyer but hadn't shared the details with any of us. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following week at Mr. Harrington's law office in town. It was a small plain room with uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines in the waiting area. We all gathered there, Mom, Uncle Peter, Jessica, Mark, and me, an awkward family reunion under fluorescent lights. Mr. Harrington was in his 70s, a contemporary of Grandma's who'd handled the family's legal matters for decades. He adjusted his glasses and began reading the formal legal language, while Uncle Peter leaned forward eagerly in his chair. To my son, Peter, Mr. Harrington read, I leave the sum of $50,000 and my collection of antique fishing gear that belonged to his father. Uncle Peter's face fell. $50,000 was a substantial amount, but nowhere near the value of the farm he'd been counting on. To my daughter, Linda, the lawyer continued, nodding toward my mother, I leave $50,000 and my jewelry collection, including the pearl necklace she always admired. Mom nodded stiffly, her expression unreadable. To my grandchildren, Jessica and Mark, I leave $25,000 each with the hope that they will use it wisely. Jessica and Mark exchanged glances. Like their father, they'd expected more. And to my granddaughter, Samantha, Mr. Harrington adjusted his glasses again, who stayed by my side when I needed her most. I leave the farmhouse and all 100 acres of the surrounding land, along with any assets or rights pertaining to that property. The room went silent. Then Uncle Peter let out a sharp laugh. The farmhouse? That's falling apart. And those fields haven't produced a crop in years. The land alone must be worth something, Mom interjected, giving me a calculating look. Especially if that developer is still interested. Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. There is a personal letter for Samantha as well, he said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandma's shaky handwriting. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of paperwork and thinly veiled disappointment from my family. Uncle Peter was already on his phone as we left the office, presumably calling his developer contact to see if the deal could still be salvaged through me. Don't make any decisions without consulting us, he instructed as we stood in the parking lot. That property represents a family legacy. A family legacy he'd been eager to sell to the highest bidder just minutes before, I noted silently. You should at least hear what offers are out there, Mom added. That old house needs more work than it's worth. Be practical, Samantha. I promised to think about it, mostly to end the conversation. All I wanted was to go back to the farm, my farm now, and read Grandma's letter in private. Once home, I sat on the porch swing where Grandma and I had spent so many evenings and carefully opened the envelope. My dearest Sam, if you're reading this, I've moved on to be with your grandfather, and the farm is now yours. I want you to know this was always the plan, even before you came to help me after my fall. Your grandfather and I saw something in you from the time you were small, a love for this land that none of our other children or grandchildren shared. What you don't know, what none of the family knows, is that Edgar didn't simply refuse the oil companies all those years ago. He was shrewder than that. He sold mineral rights to a small portion of the property, just 10 acres on the far north corner, but retained the rights to the rest, believing that someday those rights would be far more valuable. He was right. 6 months ago, Mr. Harrington helped me negotiate a deal with Meridian Energy. They've confirmed significant oil deposits on our land, Sam. The contract is in the safe behind your grandfather's portrait in the study. The combination is our wedding date, 06 to 12/39. The first wells will be installed within a year of my passing. The income will be substantial, enough to restore the farmhouse, enough to live comfortably, enough to do whatever you dream of doing while keeping our land intact. This is your legacy now, not just the money, but the responsibility of stewardship. This land has been in our family for generations, and now I'm trusting it to you. I've seen how you care for things, Sam, how you tended to me, how you nurtured the garden, how you repaired the old porch swing without being asked. You have your grandfather's hands and heart. The others see the farm as a burden or a cash cow. You see it as a home. I love you, my sweet girl. Thank you for the gift of your time and care in my final years. I hope this gift I leave to you brings you as much joy as you brought to me. All my love, Grandma Ellie. I read the letter twice, tears streaming down my face, before going to the study. The safe behind Grandpa's portrait contained exactly what Grandma had described, a thick contract with Meridian Energy, along with geological surveys showing significant oil deposits across the property. The projected income was staggering. Millions over the life of the wells. I sat up all night, thinking about what this meant, about what Grandma had entrusted to me, about how to honor both the financial opportunity and the family legacy she described. By morning, I had a plan. For the next 6 months, I said nothing to my family about the oil rights. When Uncle Peter called with news of a developer willing to pay top dollar for the land, I politely declined. When Mom suggested selling at least part of the property to fund a real life back in the city, I changed the subject. That farmhouse is eating up all your savings, she warned during one phone call. You're as stubborn as Ellie was. Thank you, I replied, taking it as the compliment it wasn't intended to be. Meanwhile, Meridian Energy began the process of installing the first wells on my property. I worked closely with their environmental teams to ensure minimal disruption to the land. I used some of the initial payments to begin restoring the farmhouse, hiring local contractors to repair the roof and replace the ancient plumbing. When the first well was completed and ready to begin production, I decided it was time. I sent identical invitations to Mom, Uncle Peter, Jessica, and Mark. You were cordially invited to a gathering at the family farm to celebrate new beginnings, Saturday, June 12th, 2 p.m. They all accepted, probably curious about what I could possibly be celebrating in that money pit of a farm. The day of the gathering was perfect. Clear blue Oklahoma sky, gentle breeze, the fields around the farmhouse lush and green. I'd had the house painted, the porch rebuilt, the garden landscaped. It looked better than it had in decades. Uncle Peter arrived first, his luxury SUV kicking up dust on the long driveway. He stepped out and looked around with obvious surprise. Place looks different, he commented, taking in the improvements. You've been busy. I have, I agreed, leading him to the back porch where I'd set up refreshments. Mom, Jessica, and Mark arrived soon after, all making similar observations about the farm's transformation. This must have cost a fortune, Mom said suspiciously. Where did you get the money, Samantha? That's actually why I asked you all here today, I replied, handing each of them a glass of Grandma's favorite lemonade. I wanted to show you something. I led them across the backfield, following a newly graveled path toward the north corner of the property. As we crested a small hill, the oil well came into view, a pumping unit moving rhythmically up and down against the horizon. They all stopped in their tracks. Is that? Uncle Peter began, his voice faltering. An oil well. Yes, I confirmed. The first of several Meridian Energy will be installing over the next year. There's oil on this property? Mark asked incredulously. Quite a lot, according to the surveys. I handed each of them a copy of a simplified version of the contract. Grandpa suspected it decades ago. He sold mineral rights to a small section but kept the rest. Grandma finalized this deal 6 months before she died. They stared at the papers, then at the well, then at me, their expressions a mix of shock, confusion, and dawning comprehension. All this time, Uncle Peter said slowly, when we thought this land was worthless. It was never worthless, I corrected him. It was always valuable, as our family home, as our heritage, as the place Grandma and Grandpa built their lives. The oil is just a bonus. How much? Jessica asked bluntly, scanning the contract. How much is this worth? The projections are in the contract, I replied. But it's substantial. Mom looked up from the papers, her face pale. And Ellie left all of this to you. Just you? She left me the farm and everything pertaining to it, I confirmed, including the mineral rights. A heavy silence fell over the group as they processed the implications. The worthless farm they'd urged me to sell was now revealed as an asset worth millions. The year I'd wasted caring for Grandma had resulted in an inheritance beyond any of their expectations. Well, Uncle Peter finally said, forcing a smile. I suppose congratulations are in order. You certainly lucked out, Sam. It wasn't luck, I said firmly. Grandma made a choice, just like I'm making one now. I handed each of them a second document, a legal agreement establishing the Ellie and Edgar Williams Foundation. 50% of the oil revenues will go into this foundation, I explained. Its mission is to support sustainable agriculture, environmental conservation, and elder care in this county. I'm establishing it in Grandma and Grandpa's names. And the other 50%? Mom asked. Is mine, I said simply. to maintain this farm, to live my life, and to ensure this land stays in the family for the next generation, just as Grandma and Grandpa wanted. You could sell it all now and be set for life, Mark pointed out. Why hang on to this place? I looked around at the rolling fields, the old farmhouse in the distance, the big oak tree where Grandpa had built a swing decades ago. Because some things are worth more than money, I said. Grandma always told me that true wealth isn't what you have, but who you are. I believe that. My family stayed for another hour, asking questions about the oil deal, the foundation, my plans for the farm. The conversations were strained, undercurrents of regret and resentment flowing beneath their congratulatory words. But I didn't mind. I hadn't invited them to gloat or to make them feel guilty. I'd invited them because despite everything they were still family, and because I wanted them to understand what Grandma had tried to teach us all, that care and presence matter more than material success. That legacy isn't just about money, and that sometimes the things that appear least valuable hold the greatest worth. After they left, I sat on the newly rebuilt porch swing as the sun began to set. In the distance, the oil well continued its steady rhythm, pulling hidden treasure from deep within the land. But the real treasure, I knew, was the lesson Grandma had left me, to see value where others see nothing, to care for what matters, and to understand that the richest legacies aren't always visible to the casual observer. I ran my hand along the smooth wood of the swing, feeling closer to Grandma than I had since her passing. I understand now, I whispered to the evening air. Thank you. And somewhere, I like to think, Grandma Ellie was smiling. The Thompson family had a reputation to maintain. Old money, social connections, and impeccable taste were the pillars upon which Margaret Thompson built her identity. So when her only son David fell in love with me, a seemingly ordinary kindergarten teacher from a town no one in her circle had heard of, she made her disapproval crystal clear. She seems nice, Margaret had said after our first meeting, the word nice carrying the weight of profound disappointment. But honestly, David, what could you possibly have in common with someone so simple? David defended me, of course. He loved that I was unpretentious and genuine, qualities in short supply among the social climbers he'd grown up around. But Margaret's campaign of subtle undermining continued for the 2 years we dated, reaching its peak when David proposed with his grandmother's ring. Congratulations, Margaret had said coldly over the phone when David shared the news. I suppose we'll need to start planning immediately. There's so much Sarah will need to learn about how things are done in our world. Our world. As if I were an alien visiting from another planet rather than someone born just 50 miles away. The wedding planning became Margaret's battlefield. Every decision, the venue, the caterer, the flowers, became an opportunity to highlight the gulf between my limited experience and the Thompson family standards. I tried to remain gracious, reminding myself that this was about marrying David, not winning his mother's approval. Then came the dress shopping expedition. Margaret had insisted we visit an exclusive bridal salon in the city where, she informed me, Thompson women had been selecting their wedding gowns for generations. The appointment had been scheduled months in advance, and Margaret had arranged for several of her closest friends to accompany us, women whose names regularly appeared in society pages and charity gala photographs. It's tradition, she explained when I suggested keeping the shopping party smaller. These women have known David since he was a child. Their opinion matters. What she really meant, of course, was that my opinion mattered less. The salon was exactly as intimidating as I'd expected. All crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes, with gowns displayed like museum pieces. The owner greeted Margaret with air kisses and exclamations about how long it had been since they'd seen each other. And this must be the bride, she said, examining me with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Yes, this is Sarah, Margaret replied. We'll need something that flatters her figure. Perhaps something with sleeves, and nothing too fashion-forward. Something classic to elevate her natural simplicity. I bit my tongue as the salon staff measured me and discussed my challenging proportions, as if I weren't present. Margaret's friends sipped champagne and reminisced about their own wedding dresses, each apparently more exquisite than the last. After trying on 7 different gowns, each met with subtle grimaces and whispered consultations among Margaret's committee, I was exhausted and close to tears. Perhaps we should continue another day, the salon owner suggested delicately. Finding the perfect gown can be a process. That's when my phone rang. It was my mother. Sarah, honey, I know you're busy with the Thompson dress shopping today, but I wanted to let you know that package we discussed arrived. It's even more beautiful than we hoped. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. That's wonderful news, Mom. I'll stop by later to see it. When I ended the call, Margaret was watching me with narrow-eyed suspicion. A package? Something for the wedding? She asked. Just something my mother wanted me to see, I replied vaguely. Speaking of which, I should probably wrap up here. Thank you all for your time and input. Margaret looked affronted. But we haven't found anything suitable yet. Sarah, this isn't like picking up something from a department store. A proper wedding gown requires time and consideration. I understand, I said, summoning my kindergarten teacher patience. And I appreciate everyone's help today. But I think I need some time to reflect on the options. 2 weeks later, Margaret called an emergency meeting at her home to discuss what she termed concerning developments with the wedding planning. David and I arrived to find her in the sunroom, surrounded by wedding magazines and sample table settings. Sarah, she began without preamble, I've heard disturbing rumors that you've purchased a wedding dress without proper consultation. Some off-the-rack item from a boutique in your hometown? I took a deep breath. I have found my dress, yes. Margaret's perfectly manicured hand fluttered to her throat. But we haven't approved anything. The salon was preparing a selection of appropriate options for our next appointment. I appreciate that, but I found something I love. Well, Margaret said with forced brightness, I'm sure it's nice. Perhaps we can have it altered by professionals to make it more suitable. Where did you find this dress? Actually, it was my mother who found it. Margaret exchanged knowing glances with her friend Beatrice, who had apparently been summoned for moral support. I see, well, that explains a lot. I'm sure your mother meant well, but she couldn't possibly understand the standards expected at a Thompson wedding. David, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Mom, I'm sure Sarah's dress is beautiful, and ultimately, it's her decision. Of course it is, Margaret replied with a tight smile. I simply want to make sure Sarah doesn't feel uncomfortable when she's standing next to proper society brides in their photos. People notice these things. Perhaps, Beatrice suggested with fake helpfulness, we could see this dress, just to get a sense of what alterations might be needed. I hesitated, then nodded. Actually, I brought it with me today. I thought you might want to see it. Margaret's eyebrows shot up in surprise. You brought it here? Today. It's in the car. I'll go get it. When I returned carrying a garment bag, Margaret had composed herself, clearly prepared to be diplomatic about whatever fashion disaster she expected to emerge. David squeezed my hand reassuringly as I unzipped the bag. The dress that emerged was a masterpiece of understated elegance, an ivory silk column with delicate beadwork along the neckline and a supple train. Even on the hanger, it was clearly something special. What a shame your family couldn't afford something better. My future mother-in-law sneered, examining my wedding dress with obvious disappointment. Everyone will know you don't belong in our circle. I stayed silent as she continued her critique. It looks like a discount store knockoff, she declared, reaching for the collar. The beadwork is clumsy, and this silk is clearly synthetic. When she flipped the collar to check the label, her face went completely white. This is impossible. Because there, on the designer label, was a name even Margaret Thompson approached with reverence. Alessandra Ricci, the Italian designer whose creations were worn by royalty and whose waiting list was years long. There must be some mistake, she stammered. This can't be authentic. How would you possibly? It's genuine, I confirmed quietly. A gift from my godmother. Your godmother? Beatrice echoed incredulously. Who exactly is your godmother? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. David went to answer it, returning moments later with my mother and a woman Margaret clearly recognized immediately. Elena? Margaret gasped, rising to her feet. Elena Ricci? What are you doing here? The woman who entered, elegant silver-haired, dressed in simple but exquisite linen, smiled warmly. Maggie Thompson. It's been 30 years? Still intimidating young brides, I see. Some things never change. My mother stepped forward, squeezing my shoulders supportively. I believe you've been getting to know my daughter, though perhaps not as well as you thought. Margaret looked between them in growing confusion. I don't understand. How do you know Elena Ricci? Elena, The Elena Ricci, sister of Alessandra and co-founder of their fashion empire, laughed lightly. Catherine and I were roommates at university before I moved back to Milan. She was the first American to model for our early collections. Model? Margaret repeated weakly, staring at my mother, the kindergarten teacher's aide from a small town who apparently had an entirely different past than the one Margaret had assumed. Just for a few years, my mother said modestly, before I met Sarah's father and decided to move back home. But Elena and I remained close. She's Sarah's godmother, and when she heard about the wedding, I insisted on designing her dress personally, Elena finished. Catherine was like a sister during those early struggling years. Her daughter is family. Margaret sank back into her chair, speechless for perhaps the first time in her life. Her friend Beatrice was staring at my mother with newfound fascination. You're Catherine Jensen, the face of Ricci's breakthrough '89 collection. I still have those magazine spreads. You disappeared from the fashion world so suddenly. My mother smiled. I found another calling, one that made me happier than the fashion world ever did. I felt David's arm slip around my waist as we watched his mother attempting to recalibrate everything she thought she knew. So you see, Margaret, I said gently, while I appreciate your guidance with the wedding planning, I do have some resources of my own. And more importantly, I know exactly who I am and where I come from, even if you've made some incorrect assumptions. The silence that followed was broken by Elena, who clapped her hands decisively. Shall we discuss the rest of the wedding party? I've brought some sample designs for the mother of the groom. Something that would complement Sarah's dress beautifully, Maggie, if you're interested. 2 days later, David and I were having dinner at my parents' modest but comfortable home, the home where I'd grown up, surrounded by photographs of my mother's brief but significant modeling career alongside pictures of school plays and soccer tournaments. I've never seen my mother speechless before, David marveled, helping my father grill vegetables in the backyard. She's been almost deferential since meeting your mom and Elena. My father laughed. Catherine has that effect on people when they discover her past. She never made a big deal of it. That's not her style. But she was quite something in her day. Still is. I called from the patio table where I was helping my mother set up dinner. My mother smiled. The funny thing is, Margaret and I probably would have found common ground if she bothered to ask rather than assume. We both left high-profile worlds to focus on family. We both value education and community, but she was so busy sizing me up for where I fit in her social hierarchy that she never saw me at all. The wedding planning shifted dramatically after what David jokingly called the dress revelation. Margaret didn't exactly become warm, but her approach changed from condescension to careful respect. She consulted rather than dictated, and occasionally even deferred to my mother's connections, which turned out to include not just Elena Ricci, but several other notable figures from her previous life. On the day of the wedding, as my mother helped me into the exquisite dress that had caused such a stir, I reflected on the unexpected gift Margaret's snobbery had delivered, the chance to bridge 2 parts of my family history and to claim my own identity in the process. You know, my mother said, adjusting my veil, in all my years wearing runway creations, I never felt as beautiful in a dress as I know you will today, because today you're marrying for love, not for appearance. When I walked down the aisle toward David, I passed Margaret in the front row. For once, her focus wasn't on how things looked to others or whether standards were being maintained. Instead, there were tears in her eyes as she watched her son's face light up at the sight of me. At the reception, Elena Ricci raised a toast that perfectly captured the journey we'd all taken. To David and Sarah, and to the 2 families joining today. May you all discover, as I have throughout my career, that true elegance comes not from labels or pedigrees, but from authenticity, kindness, and the courage to see beyond first impressions. Margaret, seated beside Elena at the head table, actually clinked glasses with my mother at these words. Later, as David and I danced under the stars, he whispered, "You know what my favorite part of that dress is?" "What?" I asked, expecting him to comment on the exquisite beadwork or perfect fit. That underneath all its fancy pedigree, it's being worn by the down-to-earth kindergarten teacher I fell in love with. The one who knows exactly who she is, with or without designer labels. I kissed him, grateful for a partner who had seen me clearly from the beginning, something his mother was only now learning to do. 6 months after the wedding, Margaret invited my mother and me to tea at her home. The pretension that had characterized our earlier visits was noticeably absent as she led us to a sun-dappled patio rather than a formal drawing room. "I've been doing some thinking," she said, uncharacteristically hesitant, "about first impressions and hidden depths, about how we present ourselves to the world and what we choose to reveal." My mother and I exchanged surprised glances as Margaret continued. "Catherine, when we first met, I made assumptions based on your current life, never imagining your past experiences. I judged Sarah through the same limited lens." She paused, clearly finding this difficult. "The truth is, before I married into the Thompson family, my background was much closer to yours than anyone in my social circle knows. My father owned a hardware store. I worked as a sales clerk through college." This revelation stunned us both. Margaret Thompson, the arbiter of old money social standards, had reinvented herself just as thoroughly as my mother had, but in the opposite direction. When I met Philip Thompson, I was determined to fit into his world perfectly. I studied how the right people dressed, spoke, entertained. I erased every trace of my origins until I convinced even myself that I'd always belonged. She looked at me directly. "When David brought you home, Sarah, I didn't see a wonderful woman who made my son happy. I saw a reminder of everything I'd worked to distance myself from. I was terrified you might expose the fraud I sometimes still feel like." Margaret. My mother said gently, "We all create different versions of ourselves throughout our lives. There's no shame in transformation." "The shame," Margaret replied, "is in denying where we came from, in treating others as less worthy because of where we think they belong in some imaginary hierarchy." She reached across the table and, in an unprecedented gesture, covered my hand with hers. "I hope you'll give me the chance to be a better mother-in-law than I've been so far, and perhaps a friend in time." As we drove home afterward, my mother and I tried to process this unexpected turn. "Do you think she's sincere?" I asked. "Yes," my mother said thoughtfully. "Recognition is a powerful thing. Sometimes people need to see themselves reflected in unexpected places before they can acknowledge their own truth. Like seeing a kindergarten teacher in an Alessandra Ricci original?" My mother laughed. "Exactly, but the dress didn't change who you are, Sarah. It just helped Margaret see past her own prejudice. And that, perhaps, was the greatest gift of all. Not the designer dress or the social connections, but the reminder that our true worth has nothing to do with labels, whether they're sewn into a wedding gown or attached to a family name." A year later, when I discovered I was pregnant, Margaret was among the first people we told. Her eyes filled with tears as she hugged me, a genuine embrace without concern for appearances. "This child," she said, "will have the best of all worlds. Thompson determination, Jensen creativity, and parents who know the value of authenticity." As we left her home that evening, David squeezed my hand. "Who would have thought a wedding dress could change so much?" "Not the dress," I corrected him, "the willingness to look beyond it." The Hamilton Hotel had stood on the corner of Fifth and Pine for over a century, its red brick facade a testament to Seattle's golden age. From my office on the mezzanine, I could see the construction cranes circling like vultures, modern glass towers rising on every side of our little piece of history. Soon they'd be coming for us too, or so they thought. I'm Sarah Hamilton, the last of the Hamilton hoteliers, though that title didn't mean much anymore. Our once brand establishment had been struggling for years, unable to compete with the luxury chains and boutique hotels that now dominated downtown. At least that's what everyone believed. Miss Hamilton, Maria, our head housekeeper for 30 years, knocked softly. "The people from Apex Development are here, again." I sighed, straightening my jacket. This would be their third visit this week. Send them up. Marcus Chen and Victoria Ross swept into my office like they owned it already, which, according to the papers spread across my desk, they soon would. Apex Development had made what they called a generous offer of $2 million for the property, well below market value but enough to pressure a supposedly failing business. "Sarah," Marcus smiled, all perfect teeth and expensive suit. "Have you had a chance to review the final offer?" I glanced at the contract, thinking about the secret I discovered just last night while going through my grandfather's old files. "I have some concerns about the historic preservation clauses." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "The building's not officially landmarked. Once the sale goes through, Apex can proceed with our development plans without restriction." That's what they thought. But Grandfather Hamilton had been cleverer than anyone knew. The hotel's losing money every month, Marcus added, his smile turning predatory. Property taxes in this area have tripled. How long can you keep operating at a loss? He wasn't wrong about the challenges. The Hamilton had been struggling ever since my father's death 5 years ago. We'd lost corporate accounts to newer hotels, our maintenance costs were rising, and the property taxes in booming downtown Seattle were crushing. But we weren't quite as desperate as they believed. $2 million is more than fair, Victoria pressed, especially considering the building's condition. The electrical needs updating, the plumbing is ancient, and let's be honest, the whole place needs a complete overhaul. I touched the antique desk that had been my grandfather's, remembering the hours I'd spent here as a child, listening to his stories about the hotel's glory days, about the secret he protected, waiting for the right moment. The Hamilton has been more than just a hotel, I said quietly. It's been a part of Seattle's history for over 100 years. My grandfather used to tell me about the speakeasy in the basement during Prohibition, the jazz musicians who played in our ballroom, the secret meetings during World War II. Fascinating history, Marcus cut in, not bothering to hide his boredom. But history doesn't pay the bills. Our offer expires at the end of the week. After that, well, he shrugged. Banks aren't very sentimental about foreclosures. They left, leaving behind the contract and the weight of their threats. As soon as the door closed, I pulled out the document I found last night, my grandfather's original deed to the property, dated 1973. The deed with a very special clause that Apex's lawyers had somehow missed. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom, my best friend since college and now one of Seattle's top real estate attorneys. Found it. The clause is still valid. Call me ASAP. I smiled, remembering my grandfather's words from years ago. Sometimes, Sarah, the best move in business is to let your opponents think they've won, right up until the moment they discover they've lost everything. The Hamilton had secrets that went far deeper than its history, secrets that would turn Apex's $100 million development plans to dust. My father had never known about the clause. Grandfather had taken that secret to his grave, leaving only a letter for me to find when the time was right. Last night, sorting through his old files in preparation for the sale, I'd finally discovered it. My dearest Sarah, the letter began, if you're reading this, someone's trying to take our hotel. But what they don't know is that in 1973, when Seattle was dying and downtown property was worthless, I added a special covenant to the deed. The Hamilton Hotel can never be demolished or significantly altered without unanimous approval from all living members of the Hamilton family, not just majority approval, unanimous. And the covenant runs with the land, binding all future owners in perpetuity. I touched the original deed, its pages yellowed but its legal language crystal clear. Any attempt to demolish or fundamentally alter the hotel would require my approval. An approval I would never give. But that wasn't even the biggest secret the Hamilton held. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Come in. Maria entered, closing the door carefully behind her. Miss Sarah. The men from the Historical Society are here. They've finished their inspection of the basement. I stood up quickly, and she smiled, her eyes twinkling. They found it, exactly where your grandfather said it would be. The original Shanghai tunnels connecting to 3 other buildings. They're intact, and they're spectacular. The Shanghai tunnels, a network of underground passages that ran beneath downtown Seattle, used during Prohibition and rumored to be part of the Underground Railroad. Most have been destroyed or sealed off during later development, but according to my grandfather's letters, the Hamilton's tunnels have been preserved, hidden behind false walls in the basement. Tunnels that, according to the Historical Society's preliminary assessment, would make the hotel eligible for National Historic Landmark status. Status that would make it virtually impossible for any developer to touch the property. My phone buzzed again. Tom, sending documents proving that the covenant was ironclad. Apex's lawyers missed it completely. His message read, they have no idea what they're walking into. I sat back in my grandfather's chair, looking out at the city he'd loved so much. The Seattle of his day was almost gone, replaced by glass and steel monuments to progress. But the Hamilton had endured, protecting its secrets until they were needed most. The hotel wasn't failing. I just made it look that way. Every lost corporate account had been carefully documented. Every maintenance issue strategically exaggerated. The property taxes were high, but the hotel's true financial situation was far from desperate. My grandfather had taught me that sometimes you had to lose a little to win big. Apex thought they were buying a struggling hotel for a bargain price. Instead, they were walking into a trap that would cost them millions. Tomorrow, I would sign their contract, playing the part of the defeated heiress forced to sell her family legacy. I'd watch them celebrate their victory, planning their luxury condos and boutique shops. Then, when demolition day came, I would show them the covenant, the historical designation, the true value of the property they thought they were stealing. The Hamilton had one more story to tell, and this time, the ending would be written by a Hamilton. The signing ceremony was everything Apex Development had hoped for. A media event showcasing their latest acquisition in downtown Seattle's transformation. Local news cameras captured my reluctant signature on the sales contract, Marcus Chen's triumphant handshake, and Victoria Ross's perfectly rehearsed speech about progress and urban renewal. The Hamilton Hotel has been a beloved landmark, she announced to the gathered reporters. But it's time for Seattle to embrace the future. Apex's new luxury development will revitalize this entire block. I sat quietly, playing my part as the defeated heiress. Only Tom, standing beside me as my attorney, knew I was fighting back a smile. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Apex's team swarmed the hotel, conducting surveys and making plans. They never noticed that every routine inspection by the Historical Society was carefully documented, building our case for landmark status. Or that every architectural assessment was quietly copied to my files, proving the building's structural integrity. Then came the morning they'd all been waiting for. Demolition day. I arrived early, watching the construction crews set up their equipment. Marcus and Victoria stood with their project managers, reviewing plans and checking schedules. They didn't even notice me until I walked up with Tom and Maria. Sarah, Marcus nodded dismissively. Come to say goodbye to the old place. Actually, I smiled. I'm here to protect my property. Victoria frowned. Your property? You signed it over to Apex 3 weeks ago. About that. Tom stepped forward, opening his briefcase. You might want to take a look at these documents first. The next hour was chaos. Apex's lawyers huddled over the original deed, faces growing paler as they confirmed the covenant's validity. Historical Society representatives presented their findings about the Shanghai tunnels, complete with photographs and preservation requirements. City officials arrived with preliminary landmark designation papers. This is impossible, Marcus sputtered, waving the deed. Our lawyers checked everything. Apparently not carefully enough, Tom replied calmly. The covenant is ironclad and runs with the land. You can't demolish or significantly alter the hotel without unanimous approval from all living Hamiltons. Fine, Victoria snapped. Name your price. I smiled, channeling my grandfather's quiet confidence. It's not about price. The Hamilton isn't for sale, not for demolition anyway. But I do have a proposition for you. Over the next 2 hours, in my grandfather's old office, I laid out my plan. The Hamilton would remain standing, its historic facade and crucial architectural elements preserved. But the interior would be carefully modernized, combining classic elegance with contemporary luxury. The Shanghai tunnels would become a unique tourist attraction, drawing history enthusiasts from around the world. The property is worth $100 million as a teardown, I explained, showing them the market analyses and projections. But as a unique historic luxury hotel with an exclusive underground tour, we're looking at potential revenues of $50 million annually. Marcus leaned forward despite himself. We're developers, not hoteliers. No, I agreed. But I am, 5th generation, in fact. The Hamilton hasn't been failing. I've been deliberately operating at reduced capacity while documenting everything. Our reputation in the industry is still sterling. Our customer base is still loyal. And now, with the tunnels and historic designation, we have something no other hotel in Seattle can offer. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership. Apex provides the capital for renovations, following historical preservation guidelines. The Hamilton Hotel provides the property, the expertise, and the unique historical assets. We split the profits 50-50. And if we refuse? Marcus challenged. Tom smiled. Then you own a property you can't develop, can't demolish, and can't sell for anywhere near what you paid. Meanwhile, The historical designation will require expensive maintenance and preservation measures. The negotiations lasted well into the night. By morning, we had a deal. Apex would fund a $50 million historical renovation, preserving the hotel's character while modernizing its amenities. The Shanghai tunnels would be restored and open for tours. Most importantly, the Hamilton would remain a hotel operated by its original family. 1 month later, I stood in the grand lobby watching the restoration work begin. The original marble floors were being carefully cleaned, the brass fixtures polished to their former glory. Upstairs, rooms were being elegantly updated while maintaining their historic charm. Maria appeared at my side, smiling at the activity. Your grandfather would be proud. He planned it all, I said softly. The covenant, the hidden tunnels, even the timing. He knew someday someone would try to tear down his life's work, so he made sure they couldn't. The hotel reopened 6 months later to rave reviews. History meets luxury, the Seattle Times declared. The Hamilton Hotel reveals underground secrets, wrote the Travel Channel. Our occupancy rate hit 95% within weeks. Marcus and Victoria, to their credit, adapted quickly to our new partnership. They discovered that preserving history could be as profitable as destroying it, sometimes more so. The Shanghai Tunnel tours became the hottest ticket in Seattle tourism. One evening, as I sat in my grandfather's office watching the sunset paint the city gold, I found another letter hidden in his desk. This one was dated just days before his death. My dearest Sarah, it read, by now you've saved the Hamilton and discovered its true value. But the real treasure isn't in the tunnels or the covenant or even the hotel itself. It's in understanding that progress doesn't always mean demolishing the past. Sometimes it means building on its foundation, preserving what matters while adapting to change. You've done that beautifully. The Hamilton isn't just a hotel. It's a bridge between centuries, a keeper of stories, a reminder that some things are worth saving. I trust you'll keep its secrets, preserve its legacy, and when the time comes, pass on its lessons to the next generation. With pride and love, Grandfather. I touched the antique desk, thinking about the layers of history beneath my fingers. Outside, modern Seattle stretched toward the sky, glass towers reflecting the setting sun. But here in the Hamilton, past and present have found a way to coexist, each making the other stronger. Today, the Hamilton Hotel stands as proof that progress doesn't always mean destruction. Our rooms combine historic charm with modern luxury. The Shanghai tunnels draw tourists and history buffs from around the world. Even Apex has embraced our vision, using the Hamilton success as a model for historic preservation projects in other cities. Marcus still jokes about how thoroughly I outmaneuvered them. We thought we were buying a teardown, he'd admitted at our last board meeting. Instead, we bought into a legacy. The construction cranes still circle downtown Seattle, but they no longer feel like vultures. Change is inevitable. But some things, history, family, integrity, endure. The Hamilton protected its secrets until they were needed most, just as my grandfather protected his greatest lesson. Sometimes the best way to build the future is to preserve the past. Every evening, I walk through the hotel just as my grandfather did, greeting guests, checking details, ensuring the Hamilton standards never waver. The original key rack still hangs behind the front desk, though the keys are now electronic. The grandfather clock in the lobby still chimes the hours, its brass face gleaming. And somewhere below in the restored Shanghai tunnels, tourists gather to hear stories of Seattle's past. They say every historic building has its secrets. The Hamilton's secret was that it was never just a hotel. It was a testament to the power of patience, preservation, and the quiet strength of those who protect what matters most. As for me, I'm just the latest in a long line of Hamilton hoteliers, keeping our legacy alive one story at a time. And someday, when another developer comes calling with dreams of glass towers and profit margins, they'll learn what Apex learned. Some things are worth more than money, some buildings hold more than memories, and some battles are won not with force, but with foresight. The Hamilton stands ready for its next century, its red brick facade a proud reminder that not all progress requires destruction. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply standing your ground, protecting what matters, and proving that the best stories are the ones that endure. Chen's Marketplace had been a fixture in Seattle's retail landscape for 30 years. What started as my father's small corner store had grown into a chain of 12 upscale supermarkets known for their quality imported goods and traditional customer service. But as I stood in our flagship store's management office, watching my brother David's face turn red with anger, I knew one era was about to end. Your digital transformation nonsense stops now, David snapped, waving a printout of my latest proposal. We're a family business, Sarah. Our customers come here for the personal touch, not, what did you call it? Omnichannel retail experiences. My name is Sarah Chin, and at 32, I was about to be fired from my family's business. Not because I was wrong, but because I was right too soon. The market is changing. I tried one last time. Online grocery delivery grew 400% last year alone. If we don't adapt. Enough. David slammed his hand on the desk. You've wasted hundreds of thousands on your pet projects. Mobile apps, delivery partnerships, inventory automation. None of it fits our brand. I glanced at Dad, sitting quietly in the corner. James Chen had built this business from nothing after immigrating from China, but lately he'd stepped back, letting David run things. My brother had always been his golden child, the one who thought exactly like him. Dad, I said softly, you taught us that innovation keeps businesses alive. Remember when you revolutionized Asian grocery imports in the 90s? This is the same thing. The world is changing. Dad's face remained impassive. Some changes aren't worth making, Sarah. Our customers like things the way they are. Really? I pulled up sales figures on my tablet. Is that why our revenue has dropped 15% in the last quarter? Why our customer base is aging? Why Whole Foods and Amazon Fresh are eating into our market share? Because you've distracted us from our core business, David shouted. While you've been playing with your tech toys, our traditional operations have suffered. Well, it ends today. He pulled out a formal letter. The board, which you'd know includes Dad and me as majority shareholders, has voted to terminate your employment, effective immediately. We're also canceling all technology initiatives and returning to our traditional business model. My hands shook slightly as I took the letter. 10 years of work of trying to drive our family business into the digital age ended with 2 signatures. Security will escort you out, David continued, pressing a button on his desk. Your access to all company systems has already been revoked. I looked at Dad again, seeing not anger but something worse. Disappointment. He'd never understood why his daughter, with her Stanford MBA, couldn't just accept the old ways of doing business. You'll regret this, I said quietly, gathering my things. Not because you fired me, but because you're choosing to be blind to the future. The only thing I regret, David replied, is letting you waste so much time and money on your tech fantasies. Chen's marketplace is about tradition, about personal service. Not apps and algorithms. 2 security guards appeared at the door. As they led me through the store, past employees I'd worked with for years, I held my head high. Let them see. Let them remember. Only when I reached my car did I allow myself to smile. Poor David. So confident in his victory, so certain he'd stopped my tech fantasies just in time. He had no idea what was really happening. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus, my secret partner, and former head of it at Chen's. Everything transferred before they cut access. Project Phoenix is ready. Perfect timing. For the past 18 months, while fighting my losing battle to modernize Chen's marketplace, I'd been building something on the side. A new kind of retail platform that combined the best of traditional grocery with cutting-edge technology. Every failed proposal to my family had actually been a test run. Every rejected innovation refined and improved in secret. The Seattle office of my startup, Phoenix Market, looked nothing like Chen's traditional stores. Housed in a converted warehouse, it hummed with the energy of developers, data scientists, and retail innovators. The space my family would have called industrial and cold was actually the command center of a retail revolution. Status report, I called out, entering the main floor. Mobile app downloads exceeding projections, Lisa, my head of digital, reported. Early access customers love the AI-powered shopping lists and recipe integration. Delivery network is ready, Marcus added. Fleet of electric vans fully automated and tested. We can guarantee 1-hour delivery across the entire Seattle metro area. I nodded, watching our systems track inventory, predict demand patterns, and optimize delivery routes in real time. Everything my family had rejected as unnecessary technology was here, working perfectly. What about the Amazon integration? I asked. Conference call in 10 minutes, Marcus grinned. Their exec team is excited. Nobody's ever pitched them a partnership quite like this. While Chen's marketplace struggled to compete with Amazon Fresh, I developed a different approach. Instead of fighting the e-commerce giant, we become their premium local partner, handling specialty and ethnic groceries through their platform while maintaining our own independent operation. My phone buzzed again. A news alert about Chen's marketplace's latest quarterly results. More declining sales, more lost market share. The stock price was dropping as investors worried of the company's failure to adapt to changing market conditions. Sarah, Marcus appeared at my office door. Your brother's on CNBC right now talking about their return to traditional values. I turned up the volume, watching David defend his decision to abandon all digital initiatives. Chen's marketplace is about personal service, about knowing our customers, he declared proudly. We're not going to chase tech trends at the expense of our core values. The interviewer pressed him, but with online grocery delivery growing exponentially, how will you compete? Our customers come to us for the experience, David insisted. They want to select their own produce, to talk to knowledgeable staff. You can't replicate that online. I smiled, thinking of our AI-powered product recommendation system that knew customers' preferences better than any human could. Our computer vision technology that could select better produce than most experienced staff. Time for the Amazon call, Marcus reminded me. The next hour would change everything, but not just for me, for the entire retail industry. David thought he was protecting our family's legacy by clinging to the past. He was about to learn that true legacy isn't about preserving old methods, but about evolving to serve customers better. Ready to launch? Lisa asked as I headed to the conference room. I thought about Dad's face when he signed my termination letter, about David's smugness in thinking he'd stop change from coming. Ready, I confirmed. Time to show them what the future of retail really looks like. The next few hours would transform not just my career, but the entire concept of what a family business could become. But that's another story, one that begins with a simple announcement that would make my brother choke on his morning coffee. Amazon announces revolutionary partnership with Phoenix Market, transforming local grocery delivery. The morning after the Amazon announcement, I sat in Phoenix Market's command center watching our systems light up with activity. The partnership news had broken at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. By 9 a.m. Pacific, our app downloads had crashed our servers twice. 20,000 new customers in 3 hours, Lisa reported, monitoring the analytics dashboard. Social media's exploding. Everyone wants to know how a startup nobody's heard of landed an exclusive Amazon partnership. I smiled, thinking of the 18 months of secret development that had made this possible. While my family focused on traditional retail metrics, we'd built something that redefined the entire grocery experience. Sarah, Marcus burst into the room. You need to see this. Chen's marketplace stock is in freefall, down 30% since the market opened. I pulled up the financial news on my tablet. The headlines were brutal. Chen's marketplace future in doubt as Amazon partners with innovative competitor, traditional grocery chain faces digital disruption. Former executive's new venture threatens family business legacy. My phone buzzed. David's number. I let it go to voicemail. CNBC wants an interview, Lisa said. They're calling us the future of hybrid retail. Before I could respond, the security desk called. Ms. Chen, your father is here. I froze. Dad hadn't tried to contact me since the day they fired me. Send him up. He looked older somehow, standing in the doorway of our ultra-modern office. His eyes took in the screens showing real-time data analytics, the developers coding new features, the electric delivery vans being loaded in our automated warehouse. This is what you were trying to tell us, he said quietly. All those proposals, all those ideas we rejected. This is just the beginning, I replied. Would you like to see how it really works? For the next hour, I showed him everything. The AI system that learned customer preferences and automatically suggested recipes based on dietary restrictions and past purchases. The computer vision technology that sorted produce better than human hands. The automated warehouse where robots picked and packed orders with 99.9% accuracy. That's why Amazon chose us, I explained as we watched the system work. We're not just another delivery service. We've reinvented the entire grocery experience. And our customers? Dad asked. The ones who like traditional shopping? I pulled up our customer interface. They can still have it. Our stores combine digital convenience with personal service. Watch. I showed him how customers could chat with real product experts through the app. How our smart shopping carts guided people through physical stores while suggesting complementary items. How our system remembered every preference and interaction. This isn't destroying tradition, I said softly. It's evolving it, making it better. Dad was quiet for a long moment. Your brother is calling an emergency board meeting. Chen's stock has lost almost half its value since your announcement. I know. He wants to sue you, claims you stole company secrets. I laughed. Everything we built here is original. Every innovation they rejected, we developed from scratch. Check the patents. Before he could respond, Marcus rushed in. Sarah, you need to see this. Chen's just announced they're launching their own delivery service. They're trying to partner with Instacart. I pulled up their press release and shook my head. Too little, too late. They still don't understand. This isn't about delivery. It's about reimagining the entire retail experience. As if to prove my point, our screens lit up with new data. The lunchtime rush was starting, and our AI was already adjusting delivery routes, predicting demand spikes, ensuring every order would arrive exactly when promised. 3 minutes average delivery delay, Lisa announced proudly, across 5,000 active orders. Dad watched the system work, and I saw something change in his expression. The same look he had 30 years ago when he first realized he could revolutionize Asian grocery imports. The board meeting, he said slowly. Would you come? I hesitated. To what end? To show them this. All of it, before we make another mistake. 2 hours later, I stood in Chen's Marketplace's familiar boardroom. The same room where they'd fired me, now filled with panicked board members watching their investment collapse. David was mid-rant when I walked in. Have to stop them. They're destroying everything we've built. No, I said clearly. We're building something better, and you can either adapt or become obsolete. What followed was the most intense presentation of my life. I showed them everything, the technology, the customer data, the growth projections. With each slide, the reality of their situation became clearer. We're not just losing market share, I concluded. We're losing the future. Every day you cling to outdated methods, you fall further behind. So what's your point? David snapped. You've won. Come to Globed. I've come to offer a partnership. The room went silent. Phoenix Market has the technology and innovation. Chen's Marketplace has the brand recognition and supplier relationships. Together, we could dominate the market. A merger? One board member asked. A transformation, I corrected. Chen's stores become hybrid locations, traditional shopping enhanced by our technology. Our delivery network handles online orders. Both brands grow stronger together. And who would run this transformed company? David asked tightly. We both would. You understand traditional retail operations. I understand digital innovation. We need both. The board deliberations lasted 6 hours. In the end, survival instinct won out over pride. Chen's Marketplace would merge with Phoenix Market, creating a new kind of retail company that bridged tradition and innovation. The next few months were intense, converting Chen's stores with our technology, training staff on the new systems, helping customers adapt to the changes. But the results were undeniable. Sales grew 200% in the first quarter. Customer satisfaction hit record highs. The stock price recovered and then soared as investors recognized the potential of our hybrid model. David struggled at first, but eventually found his groove running our premium in-store experiences. Turned out he was right about some customers wanting personal service. He just hadn't understood how technology could enhance rather than replace it. Dad spent more time in the business than he had in years, fascinated by how we'd reinvented his original vision. You saw the future, he told me one day. Just like I saw the potential in imported groceries 30 years ago. I forgot that innovation doesn't stop. 1 year after the merger, I stood in our flagship store, now a showcase of how traditional retail and cutting-edge technology could work together. The historic Chen's Marketplace sign hung above our smart shopping carts. Customers chatted with knowledgeable staff while our AI offered personalized recommendations through their phones. "Excuse me," an elderly customer approached. "Are you Sarah Chen, the one who made all these changes?" I nodded, slightly nervous. Many of our longtime customers had initially resisted the digital transformation. "I just wanted to say thank you," she smiled. "I still come in to shop because I love the atmosphere, but I use your app for deliveries when my arthritis acts up. It's the best of both worlds." That's when I knew we'd succeeded, not just in saving the family business, but in making it better. We hadn't destroyed tradition, we'd helped it evolve. Last week, a young entrepreneur asked my advice after a retail conference. "My family's business is struggling with digital transformation," she said. "They're afraid of losing their identity." I showed her our flagship store's command center, where traditional retail expertise merged seamlessly with cutting-edge technology. "Innovation doesn't mean abandoning your roots," I told her. "It means helping them grow in new directions. Sometimes the best way to honor tradition is to help it evolve." David joined us in the command center, now comfortable among the screens and data flows. "Tell her about the time you got fired," he grinned, "and how it was the best thing that ever happened to the family business." We'd come a long way from that day in the boardroom. The company continued to grow and innovate, but now we did it together. Tradition and technology, past and future, family and progress all working in harmony. As I write this from my office overlooking our hybrid retail operation, I think about how far we've come. The tech fantasies that got me fired have transformed not just our family business, but the entire retail industry. Dad still comes to work every day, proud to see his immigrant's dream evolve into something he never imagined. David has become a champion of innovation, always pushing us to find new ways to enhance the customer experience. And me? I learned that true innovation isn't about destroying the old to make way for the new. It's about finding ways to make them work together, creating something better than either could be alone. After all, family businesses, like families themselves, don't have to choose between tradition and progress. They just need the courage to let both grow together. The crystal chandelier glittered above the white tablecloth as waiters in crisp black uniforms circled with silver trays of appetizers. Richardson's was Boston's most exclusive restaurant, the kind of place where reservations were hereditary and the menu didn't list prices. I adjusted my tie nervously, feeling like an imposter despite my carefully tailored suit. Across from me, Sophie smiled encouragingly, reaching under the table to squeeze my hand. We'd been dating for 2 years, but this was my first formal introduction to her extended family. Her father, Gregory Davidson, sat at the head of the table, occasionally checking his Patek Philippe watch as if our dinner was cutting into more important engagements. "So, Michael," he began after the sommelier had poured an expensive Bordeaux for everyone except my parents, who had requested water. "Sophia tells me you're a teacher?" He pronounced the word as if describing an exotic disease. "Yes, sir. High school physics at Westridge Academy." "Admirable." He nodded, not looking admirable at all. "Starting salary for teachers these days is what, 40,000? 47 actually," I corrected politely, "plus summers for research." Gregory exchanged glances with his brother Charles, a hedge fund manager whose Ferrari was probably being valeted outside. "Research. I see." My parents sat quietly across the table. Dad in his dependable navy suit that he wore to church and special occasions, Mom in a simple dress she'd bought on sale at Macy's. They looked uncomfortable but dignified, determined to make a good impression despite the obvious wealth disparity. "And your family business is?" Gregory turned to my father, eyebrows raised. "Robert owns a hardware store," my mother answered proudly. "Callahan's Hardware in Worcester. It's been in the family for 3 generations." Charles nearly choked on his wine. "A hardware store. Quaint. Very entrepreneurial," added Gregory's wife Victoria, her diamond earrings catching the light as she tilted her head condescendingly. I felt heat rising in my face, but Sophia jumped in. "Michael's father gives incredible advice. He helped us fix up our apartment last summer." "I'm sure he did," Gregory nodded, signaling for more wine. "Though I imagine you'll be moving somewhere more suitable once you're married. Perhaps that high-rise development near the financial district?" "I know the developer." "We're happy where we are," Sophia replied firmly. We'd had this conversation before. Her parents couldn't understand why their Stanford-educated daughter chose to live in a modest apartment on a teacher's salary when she could easily join her father's investment firm. "So, Mr. Callahan," Charles leaned forward, swirling his wine. Do you find that people still shop at local hardware stores? With the big box retailers everywhere these days. My father smiled mildly. We do all right. Our customers appreciate personal service and expertise. I'll bet they do, Gregory chuckled. Though I can't imagine the margins are anything to write home about. Victoria touched her pearl necklace delicately. Do you handle the accounting yourself, or? My wife manages the books, Dad replied, nodding toward Mom. Sarah has always had a head for numbers. How resourceful, Victoria smiled thinly, keeping it all in the family. As the appetizers arrived, Sophia's cousin Bradley, fresh from his MBA at Wharton, decided to join in. A teacher's salary in Boston. How do you even survive? The table erupted in laughter, and I felt Sophia's hand tighten around mine under the tablecloth. My parents exchanged a glance but said nothing. We managed just fine, I said evenly. Oh, I'm sure you manage, Gregory chuckled, making air quotes. But marriage is expensive, and children even more so. Sophia was raised with certain standards. Dad, Sophia warned, but Gregory waved her off. It's a legitimate concern, princess. Michael seems like a wonderful young man, but practical matters matter. The Davidsons have certain financial expectations. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I would have ignored it, but the screen showed my father's office number, strange for a Friday evening. I'm sorry, I should take this. It might be important. I excused myself and stepped away from the table. Michael? It's Dad. Everything okay? Yes, but I need to speak with you and Mr. Davidson. Something's come up with his loan application. I frowned, confused. His what? His loan application. To the foundation. Could you put me on speaker when you get back to the table? Sure, Dad. When I returned, the conversation had moved on to Bradley's new position at Goldman Sachs. I cleared my throat. I'm sorry to interrupt, but my father needs to speak with Mr. Davidson. About a loan application. Gregory's fork clattered against his plate. What loan application? He asked me to put him on speaker, I said, still confused. I set my phone in the center of the table and pressed the speaker button. Mr. Davidson, Robert Callahan here. I apologize for interrupting your dinner. Gregory straightened his tie, composing himself. Callahan, what's this about a loan application? There must be some mistake. No mistake, sir. I'm calling about Davidson Development's application to the Callahan Foundation for the Downtown Revitalization Project. $50 million, if I recall correctly. The table went silent. Charles froze with his wine glass halfway to his lips. What? Gregory stammered, color draining from his face. The board just approved it unanimously. I wanted to let you know right away since you marked it urgent. Shall I have the funds transferred Monday morning, or would you prefer immediate processing? There'd be a small expediting fee, of course. Gregory stared at the phone, then at my father across the table, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. You're Robert Callahan, of the Callahan Foundation. My father nodded simply. Yes, though I prefer Bob in social settings. Victoria's hand flew to her pearls. The Callahan Foundation that funded the new wing at Mass General? That owns half the waterfront. 30% of the waterfront, my mother corrected gently. We've diversified in recent years. I sat frozen, as confused as everyone else at the table. The Callahan Foundation. My parents had never mentioned any foundation. Mr. Davidson. My father's voice continued from the speaker. About that transfer. Gregory swallowed hard. Monday is fine, Mr. Callahan. Thank you. Excellent. We can discuss details at the board reception next week. Sarah and I look forward to seeing you there. Enjoy your dinner. The call ended, leaving an awkward silence broken only by the ambient restaurant noise around us. Charles was the first to recover, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cough. Well, Robert, you've been holding out on us. My father took a sip of water. Not at all. You simply never asked about the foundation. We like to keep the hardware store as our public face. Keeps us grounded. The hardware store is a cover? Bradley asked incredulously. Not a cover, my mother clarified. It's where Robert's grandfather started. We maintain it out of respect for our roots and because we believe in honest work. The foundation grew from those principles. I stared at my parents, strangers suddenly in familiar faces. Why did you ever tell me? Mom reached across to touch my hand. We wanted you to find your own way without the burden of the family name. You chose teaching because you love it, not because you were rebelling against or conforming to family expectations. Gregory had gone from pale to flushed. The Callahan Foundation assets are, what exactly? Last quarter. Just under 12 billion, my mother replied matter-of-factly. We've had a good year. Victoria nearly dropped her fork. Billion? With a B? Philanthropy has been very good to us, Dad said mildly. Though we find that how you give matters more than how much. Gregory turned to me, his expression completely transformed. Michael, I had no idea. Please accept my apologies for any misunderstanding earlier. No apology necessary, I replied automatically, still processing this revelation. Sophia was staring at me, her expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was shocked, amused, or angry that I'd never shared this information I myself hadn't known. If you'll excuse us, she said suddenly, standing and taking my hand. Michael, and I need a moment. She led me to a quiet alcove near the restaurant's entrance, away from prying eyes and ears. Did you know? She demanded immediately. Sophia, I swear I had no idea. The hardware store, our house in Worcester, everything has always been solidly middle class. Comfortable but modest. She searched my face, then burst out laughing. Oh my God, your father is incredible. Did you see Dad's face? I thought he was going to swallow his tongue. Her reaction broke the tension, and I found myself laughing too. I'm still in shock. $12 billion? My allowance growing up was $20 a week, and I had to mow the lawn for that. She grew serious, taking both my hands in hers. Why do you think they kept it from you? I thought about it, remembering countless childhood lessons about the value of hard work, the importance of earning respect rather than buying it, the responsibility that came with privilege. I think they wanted me to understand the value of things that money can't buy, to know who I was apart from wealth or status. And who are you, Michael Callahan? Sophia asked softly. The same person I was 20 minutes ago. A physics teacher who loves explaining how the universe works. The guy who fell in love with a brilliant woman who chose a meaningful career over a corner office in her father's company. I hesitated. Does this change anything for you? She shook her head firmly. Not a thing. Though I admit I'm enjoying watching my family squirm after the way they treated your parents. When we returned to the table, the dynamic had shifted dramatically. Gregory was engaged in animated conversation with my father about community development initiatives. Victoria was showing my mother pictures of her charity committee's recent gala, while Charles and Bradley listened attentively to every word my parents spoke. As we took our seats, Gregory raised his glass. A toast to Michael and Sophia, and to new family connections that promised to be enlightening. The evening continued with newfound warmth, though I noticed my parents remained exactly as they had been, polite, unpretentious, and quietly dignified. They answered questions about the foundation's work without boasting, deflected inquiries about their personal wealth, and consistently steered conversations toward community impact rather than financial returns. After dessert, as we waited for the valet to bring around our cars, my father pulled me aside. Son, I owe you an explanation. You think, I replied, but without anger. He smiled apologetically. Your grandfather built something remarkable from that little hardware store, not just a business, but a philosophy about wealth and responsibility. When he established the foundation, he was clear about its purpose, to do good quietly, without seeking recognition or power. So you let me believe we were just ordinary. There's no such thing as just ordinary, Michael. Every person has value independent of their bank account. We wanted you to know your own worth before you knew your inheritance. And when were you planning to tell me? After the wedding, actually. We have a whole presentation prepared, he chuckled. Though I admit, I accelerated the timeline a bit tonight. I couldn't sit there and watch that man dismiss you and your mother. I shook my head, amazed. All these years, I've been applying for scholarships, working summer jobs, budgeting carefully. And those experiences shaped you into someone who understands the value of education, hard work, and financial responsibility. Would you trade that understanding for a childhood of privilege? Before I could answer, the Davidson family approached, led by Gregory with an entirely new demeanor. Robert, Sarah, we'd love to have you over to the house soon. Perhaps next weekend. A small gathering, just family. That sounds lovely, my mother replied graciously. Though we'd be equally happy to host you at our home in Worcester. It's modest, but the garden is beautiful this time of year. Victoria, who had probably never set foot in a suburb like Worcester in her life, nodded enthusiastically. We'd be delighted. Wouldn't we, Gregory? As we said our goodbyes, Sophia squeezed my hand and whispered, "Your parents are amazing." They really are, I agreed, watching as they climbed into their 10-year-old Volvo. A car they clearly could have replaced with a fleet of luxury vehicles at any time. On the drive home, I called my parents on speakerphone so Sophia could hear. "So, $12 billion? I asked without preamble. My mother laughed. 11.8 technically, and most of it is in the foundation, committed to various causes. But still, I was still struggling to reconcile this new reality with my understanding of my family. "Michael," my father said gently, "nothing important has changed. We're still the same people with the same values. The only difference is that now you understand the responsibility that will eventually be yours. The hardware store is a profitable small business that employs 15 people and serves a community that would otherwise have to drive 20 minutes to a big box store. It matters, son." Sophia leaned toward the phone. "Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, I just want to say, thank you for raising someone who chose to teach because he loves it, not because he had to." "We're the ones who should be thanking you, Sophia," my mother replied warmly, "for loving our son when all you knew was that he was a teacher from a family that owned a hardware store." After we hung up, Sophia and I drove in contemplative silence for a while. "Does it bother you?" I finally asked. "That I never knew. That I can't even claim I was rejecting wealth on principle. I just had no idea it existed." She considered this. "What bothers me is thinking about how differently my family would have treated you if they'd known from the beginning. How differently they might have treated someone else in your position who didn't happen to have a secret fortune." "Me too," I admitted. "So what now? Do you quit teaching and join the family foundation?" I shook my head firmly. "Absolutely not. I love my job. Though I might talk to my parents about establishing a scholarship fund for students interested in STEM education." She smiled. "That sounds perfect." Later that night, after dropping Sophia at her apartment, I drove to my own modest one-bedroom, seeing it through new eyes. I could move tomorrow to a penthouse, buy a sports car, live a completely different life. The possibility was dizzying. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and called my parents again. "I need to understand everything," I told them. "The foundation, the responsibilities, the expectations. If I'm going to be part of this legacy, I want to do it right." My father's voice was warm with pride. "That's exactly what we hoped you'd say. Come home this weekend, we'll start at the beginning. And Sophia, bring her," my mother said without hesitation. "She's family now." As I hung up, I realized that while my understanding of my family had been appended, the core truths remained unchanged. My parents had always valued character over wealth, service over status, and genuine connections over social climbing. The revelation of our financial situation didn't change who we were. It just added responsibility to the values they'd already instilled. 3 months later, Sophia and I were married in a ceremony that balanced elegance with meaning. The Davidson family, still slightly shell-shocked by the revelation of the Callahan fortune, had become noticeably more humble. Gregory had even started showing genuine interest in community development beyond its profit potential. At the reception, my father clinked his glass for the traditional toast. Guests fell silent, many of them still adjusting to the idea that unassuming Robert Callahan from a hardware store was actually Robert Callahan of the Callahan Foundation. When Sarah and I decided to keep our foundation work separate from our family life, he began, "We did so believing that wealth should be a tool for good, not a measure of worth. We wanted Michael to define himself by his character, not his inheritance." He turned to me and Sophia. "Today, as we celebrate your marriage, we couldn't be prouder of the choice you made, to find someone who values you for exactly who you are, not what you have." He raised his glass. "May you build a life together that remains true to itself, regardless of circumstance. And may you always remember that the greatest fortune isn't measured in dollars, but in how many lives you touch for the better." As glasses raised around the room, I caught Gregory Davidson's eye. The arrogance that had so defined him at our first dinner had given way to something resembling respect, not for the Callahan wealth, but perhaps finally for the Callahan values. And that, I realized, was the point of my parents' long deception, to ensure that when the truth eventually emerged, we would all understand that true worth had nothing to do with net worth at all. The Ocean Tech Foundation's glass-walled conference room had never felt so suffocating as it did that Wednesday morning, watching security pack up 3 years of research into cardboard boxes. My revolutionary ocean cleanup system dismissed as impractical and delusional by people who'd never even seen it in action. Dr. Chen, Marcus Thompson, the Foundation's director, said with practiced disappointment, "Let's be realistic. Your bioengineering approach is simply too experimental. The board needs proven solutions, not science fiction." I carefully wrapped the model of my cleanup system, a network of engineered microorganisms designed to break down plastic waste without harming marine life. The prototype that had already shown remarkable results in controlled testing. "The test results are clear," I said quietly. "If you just look at the data from the Pacific trials." "Enough," he waved dismissively. "Your funding is terminated. The Foundation needs practical solutions, not fantasy projects about plastic-eating bacteria." My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and until today, I was the lead researcher at one of America's largest environmental organizations. But I committed the cardinal sin of environmental science. I proposed a solution that seemed too good to be true. Tom John, my research assistant, caught me at the elevator. "They're already shutting down the lab," he whispered. "But don't worry, everything important is backed up. All the test data, all the genetic sequences." I nodded slightly, touching the hard drive in my bag. "The Pacific samples. Safe in a secondary lab. They don't even know it exists." "Good. Those samples would prove everything." The San Francisco fog felt appropriate as I walked to my car, my mind racing through the events that had led to this moment. The breakthrough had started with a simple observation: a unique strain of bacteria found in the Pacific garbage patch that had naturally evolved to metabolize certain types of plastic. But it wasn't just consuming the plastic. Through careful bioengineering, we'd enhanced its capabilities, creating a strain that could break down multiple types of plastic waste while producing harmless byproducts that actually nourish marine life. My phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Emily Wong at Scripps Oceanographic Institute. "Just heard about Ocean Tech. Those fools. But Sarah, the latest DNA sequencing results. This is bigger than we thought." Emily had been quietly running parallel tests, validating our results without the Foundation's knowledge. She'd seen the same remarkable plastic degradation rates in her samples. "The backup lab?" I texted back. "Fully operational. Your latest batch is showing even better results than predicted." I smiled, thinking of Thompson and the board, so certain they'd shut down a fantasy project. They had no idea that the most important research was happening completely off their radar. The thing about environmental science is that it's not just about the research. It's about funding, politics, and established methodologies. Question those, and you become a threat to the entire system. I learned that lesson 2 months ago when I first presented my preliminary findings to the board. "This is nonsense," Thompson had declared, barely glancing at the data. "You're suggesting that we can clean up millions of tons of ocean plastic with bacteria? It's absurd." "Not just bacteria," I corrected. "Engineered microorganisms specifically designed for this purpose. Look at the degradation rates." But they hadn't wanted to look. Traditional cleanup methods brought in reliable funding. My approach threatened that comfortable paradigm. What they didn't know was that we'd already started a larger-scale trial. 3 test sites in the Pacific garbage patch, carefully monitored and showing unprecedented results. Areas where plastic waste was literally disappearing, replaced by healthy marine ecosystems. My apartment felt empty that evening as I set up my makeshift research station on the dining room table. My laptop connected to our secure server, displaying test data that would make Thompson and the board choke on their certainties. The results were undeniable. In just 6 weeks, our engineered bacteria had broken down over 60% of the plastic waste in the test areas. Water quality readings were actually improving. Marine life was returning to previously dead zones. My phone rang. Dr. James Martinez from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. "Sarah," he said when I answered, "I just reviewed your latest trial data. This is revolutionary. How quickly can you get to Massachusetts?" I'd met James at a conference last year, where he'd shown unusual interest in my unrealistic approach. They seized my official research, I told him. But not everything, I hope. The question was careful, measured. No, the important data is safe. Good. He paused. Because I have something you need to see. Remember those anomalous results I mentioned in my Arctic samples? My heart started racing. The same degradation patterns. Exactly, and Sarah, the bacteria are adapting to colder temperatures naturally. This could work in any ocean environment. I sat down hard, my mind spinning. Independent confirmation from one of the world's top marine research institutions. We need to meet, I said. But not here. They'll be watching. Already planned. There's an international marine science conference in Sydney next week. Thompson and his crowd won't attend. It's too focused on experimental approaches. But there's someone you need to meet. She's been seeing similar results in the Indian Ocean. I glanced at my screen where test data showed the impossible plastic waste disappearing at rates that defied every existing cleanup model. Send me the details. After hanging up, I dove back into the data. The pattern was becoming clearer with each analysis. Our engineered bacteria weren't just consuming plastic. They were evolving and improving in the wild, adapting to different conditions while remaining safe for marine life. My phone buzzed again. A message from our monitoring team at one of the test sites. Dr. Chen, the latest satellite imagery. The plastic concentration is down 70%. Marine life readings are off the charts. What you've created, it's actually healing the ocean. I thought of Thompson and the board, so certain in their dismissal. They called my research impractical, my theories delusional. They tried to bury a solution that could save our oceans, all to protect their funding and reputations. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought stopping official trials would end the research. They didn't realize that 3 test sites were already proving them wrong. That scientists like James Martinez were seeing the same results. That somewhere in the Indian Ocean, more evidence was mounting. Tomorrow, I'd book my flight to Sydney. In 1 week, everything would change. But first, I had data to analyze. Because while Thompson and his colleagues were writing me off as a failed researcher, our oceans were healing in ways that should have been impossible. And that healing told a story that would shake the foundations of environmental science. The fog swirled against my windows as I worked through the night, each data point adding to a picture that was becoming impossible to dismiss. I thought of my father, a marine biologist who died trying to document plastic pollution's impact on whale populations. Sometimes, he told me before his last voyage, the biggest breakthroughs come from the ideas everyone else rejects. He was right, and soon the world would understand why. Part 2. The Tide Turns. The Sydney International Marine Conservation Conference sprawled across the Harbourfront Convention Centre. But the real action was happening in a small meeting room overlooking the water. As I walked in carrying 3 years of rejected research, I knew I found my people. Dr. Chen, Dr. Amara Patel from the Indian Ocean Research Initiative approached, tablet in hand. Your microorganism design is extraordinary. The plastic degradation rates we're seeing, they're unprecedented. I studied her, brilliant, practical, the kind of scientist who cared more about solutions than accolades. This was the researcher James had mentioned, who'd been witnessing similar results in her waters. Show her, James called from his workstation. Show her what happened in your Maldives test site. For the next 4 hours, we compared datasets, my Pacific garbage patch trials, James's Arctic testing, Amara's work in the Indian Ocean. 3 independent studies, all showing the same remarkable results, plastic waste disappearing at rates that defied conventional cleanup models, with marine ecosystems actually thriving in the aftermath. The microorganisms aren't just consuming the plastic. Amara explained, showing underwater footage. Look at this sequence. They're breaking it down into compounds that are actually nourishing the marine food web. The biodiversity readings in our test areas are higher than in untouched control sites. It's becoming a positive feedback loop, I realized. The healthier the ecosystem gets, the more effectively it processes the remaining plastic. James finished. It's not just cleanup, it's restoration. My hands trembled as I pulled up my latest satellite imagery, and the bacteria naturally stop reproducing once plastic levels fall below a certain threshold. They've become part of the ecosystem without disrupting it. Self-limiting, Amara smiled. Nature's perfect balance. The implications were staggering. Current ocean cleanup methods were expensive, energy-intensive, and barely made a dent in the problem. But we found a way to harness nature's own processes to not just remove plastic, but restore damaged ecosystems in the process. My phone buzzed, a message from Tom. Thompson is claiming credit for early research on your project at the EPA conference. Says it was too dangerous to pursue. What should I do? I smiled. Nothing. Let him talk. We have bigger plans. Over the next 3 days, we worked around the clock, combining our data and refining deployment models. Other researchers joined us, a marine biologist from Norway, an oceanographer from Chile, a genetic engineer from New Zealand. Each brought their own insights and validation. It's not just working in one ocean environment, Dr. Johansen from Norway explained, showing his results. The microorganisms adapt to different temperatures, salinities, and plastic compositions. They're evolving in real time to maximize efficiency. Traditional methods missed this approach entirely, James added, because they were focused on physical removal. Nobody thought to look for biological solutions already emerging in nature. On the 3rd day, we presented our combined findings to the conference. The room overflowed with marine scientists, conservationists, and government representatives, people who understood the urgency of the plastic crisis and were desperate for real solutions. The data was undeniable. Satellite imagery showed plastic concentrations decreasing by up to 80% in test areas. Water quality measurements revealed healthier ocean chemistry. Biodiversity surveys documented marine life returning to previously devastated regions. During a break, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Dr. Chen, this is Admiral Lisa Rivera from the U.S. Navy Environmental Division. We've been monitoring your test sites through our satellite network. We need to talk immediately. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Meetings with naval research teams, emergency consultations with the UN Environmental Program, fast-tracked environmental impact assessments from multiple governments. Then came the call that changed everything. Dr. Chen, the UN Secretary General's voice was solemn. We've reviewed the combined data from all test sites. This is unprecedented. The Security Council is convening an emergency session on ocean restoration. How quickly can you scale up deployment? I thought of our samples, our production facilities, our distribution plans. We're ready. The news broke on a Friday morning. Revolutionary ocean cleanup method shows dramatic success in Pacific garbage patch. My phone exploded with messages. Environmental groups, government agencies, former colleagues, and then the one I've been waiting for, Thompson from Ocean Tech. Sarah, his voice had lost its condescension. The Foundation would like to discuss your return, with full funding and directorship of a new department focused on bioremediation. No thank you, I interrupted. I'm actually heading to a meeting at the UN. We're establishing an international ocean restoration initiative. I'm leading the scientific team. The silence was delicious. The next months were intense. Training deployment teams, setting up bioproduction facilities, working with governments to coordinate global release strategies. But the results exceeded our wildest hopes. Satellite imagery confirmed dramatic reduction in plastic concentrations across all test regions. Marine life flourished in areas that had been virtual dead zones. Coastal communities reported cleaner beaches and rebounding fish populations. 1 year after my humiliating exit from Ocean Tech, I stood at the United Nations General Assembly, presenting our results to world leaders. Thompson was in the audience. I spotted him in the environmental NGO section, wearing an unconvincing smile as I received a standing ovation. The paradigm shift in ocean conservation, the Secretary General announced, begins today. But the real victories came in smaller moments. A sea turtle sanctuary in Costa Rica reporting record hatchling survival rates. A fishing village in Indonesia seeing fish stocks return after decades of decline. A coral reef in Australia showing signs of recovery after years of plastic-induced stress. James now runs the Atlantic Deployment Initiative. Amara coordinates efforts across the Indian Ocean. Tom leads our monitoring program, documenting ecosystem recovery worldwide. Last week, I received a letter that made me cry. Dear Dr. Chen, 20 years ago, I watched my father's fishing business collapse as the oceans died around us. Yesterday, my son caught more fish in our local waters than I've seen in 2 decades. You didn't just clean the ocean, You gave us back our way of life. Thank you for not giving up when they tried to stop you. Carlos Mendoza, Puerto San Carlos, Mexico. I keep that letter in my office at the new Global Ocean Restoration Center. Next to it sits a framed copy of my termination notice from Ocean Tech. Signed by Thompson. Together, they remind me that breakthrough moments often look like failure to those too invested in old ways of thinking. The center itself is different from traditional research institutions. We encourage innovation, cross-disciplinary approaches, indigenous knowledge integration. Every researcher is taught to look for solutions that already exist in nature, to follow the evidence even when it challenges convention. Thompson left Ocean Tech last month. His replacement has approached us about collaboration, though they call our technology by a different name now. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the oceans are healing. My father's photograph sits on my desk. Sometimes, late at night when reviewing satellite imagery of recovering ocean regions, I imagine telling him about all this. About how his death led to discoveries that are saving the very ecosystems he loved. About how sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the ideas everyone else rejects. The microorganisms we engineered are now deployed in all major ocean garbage patches. The restoration protocols we developed are taught in marine science programs worldwide. What was once dismissed as impractical and delusional has become the foundation of a new era in environmental restoration. Last month, a young marine biologist approached me with an unusual observation. Some of our microorganisms had developed the ability to break down previously resistant microplastics. Everyone says it's just an anomaly, she said nervously. But I think there's something more happening. Look deeper, I told her. Nature often solves problems before we even understand them. Her discovery is already helping us address the most persistent forms of ocean plastic pollution. The old guard still resists sometimes. Change is hard, especially for those who built careers on previous approaches. But the results speak for themselves. Every new satellite image shows expanding zones of recovery, blue spaces where there were once islands of garbage. Yesterday, I spoke at a marine science graduation. A student asked what it felt like to be escorted from Ocean Tech that foggy Wednesday morning. It felt like failure, I admitted. But sometimes, what looks like failure is actually the first step toward breakthrough. The important thing is to trust nature's wisdom, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. The battle for our oceans isn't over. There are still challenges to solve, still damaged ecosystems to heal. But we've changed the approach. We've learned to work with nature's own intelligence rather than imposing our limited solutions. And it all started with a fantasy project and the courage to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles.